The girl tried to prove she was a true saint. The guards detained her, but she shouted that everyone had been deceived by a false saint who was pretending to be someone she was not. She simply could not believe that people actually believed in the one who had deceived them. The lady begged in tears, as the whole town rejoiced that she would be burned because the false saint had to pay for her sins. The blonde woman was doomed by fear, as vile voices kept repeating about her execution, that it would happen soon, but people said that the true saint had manifested, according to rumors. She was so powerful that Saint Ibelina, who came before her, could not even compare to her divine power. The priests insisted that there could not be another saint. Most likely, people dissatisfied with the current saint were simply spreading empty rumors, but they still believed that this saint deserved such words. This lady, Iris, is believed to make demons flee with just one look. And that's not all. She is also capable of healing dozens of wounded people at the same time. But they say there can only be one saint in the world. If this is true, then it remains to understand which of them is the true saint. And Ibelina of the temple. The girl shouted that everyone was crazy, ordering that this woman be brought to her immediately. But they tried to convince her that they were just rumors that would soon pass. But the lady did not want to hear anything, shouting that she immediately wanted to see her at her home. To which the man said that they would send Ratbun, the captain of the Templars. The child burst into the room, warning the saint that the Templars were approaching, and she needed to escape. The false saint is trying to kill Saint Iris, as the guy said, but she was busy taking care of the wounded. They did not have time to escape, and the man, a real warrior, reached them. The lady just looked at him and smiled slightly, not rushing to run anywhere. She asked to wait a little, because the saint had not finished her treatment yet. Iris treated the soldier with her hands, with true divine power. The boy, through his tears, tried to prove to the knight, because he himself saw everything. He saw that Lady Iris is a true saint, because before his eyes, she heals a person with her hands. She healed them all, from whom the boy did not want to part with her, but resolutely walked with the knights, saying that he was sure they would see each other again. The false saint looked at the redhead, ordering her to raise her head in front of her. When she knelt down and fulfilled the proclaimed saint's request, she gave her a hard slap. But the knight defended the girl, who had already been told that she had no right to pretend to be a saint and deceive the public. The woman shouted that the lady really thought she wouldn't know that this girl was practicing evil witchcraft. The blonde ordered the fake one's head to be cut off immediately, but the knight asked the saintly lady to have mercy, because he believed it was better to study this topic first. But the lady did not understand what more she had to say, because the impostor had been caught, and nothing else was needed. But if this was evil witchcraft, then this means that, most likely, more people like her would appear. Therefore, he believed that for now it was worth conducting the investigation. He was right, but the lady said that for now it was worth putting this impostor in prison. There, the girl was secured with chains on her hands and imprisoned behind bars. But some soldiers thought this was not normal, because this woman was locked up in a dungeon along with demons. Still, everyone understood that Lady Iris was definitely using divine power. However, no one in her time had ever seen Saint Ibelina use her divine power. Everyone began to discuss this, when suddenly the main knight asked what was going on, asking her to stop talking nonsense. But this, however, was suspicious, because everyone definitely saw the divine power. But the man said there was no point in talking about it. The blonde woman was completely sure that nothing would turn out well for her if she didn't get rid of the prisoner. She went to her dungeon, carrying a dagger with her, and attacked the woman chained to the wall. When suddenly, the knight immediately pushed her away, asking her what this saint was doing. But she shouted at the dark-haired man to leave her alone, because this woman had stolen her divine power. The girl was completely convinced that if she didn't end her life, she would lose her power. The man was shocked when the lady realized she had told him too much. He was very surprised that her divine power could actually disappear. Soon, all the priests and holy sisters found out that the divine power of Saint Ibelina had disappeared. From that moment on, the false saint realized she needed to escape, and the priests tried to catch the impostor. Saint Ibelina already left the temple. From now on, the 49th Saint Ibelina no longer exists. Lady Iris has become their saint, and there is no false saint. It is said that the Templar captain Radbun protected Saint Iris, as expected of him. Moreover, Miss Iris is so benevolent that even the crown prince of the empire, Leon, and the leading king, who despises the Templars, are on her side. Now that they finally caught the fleeing false saint, order reigned throughout the world. and the people burned the impostor. The evil false saint left Roman with flames as a death sentence. The girl who read this novel really wanted to sleep, and she was the only one who could not rejoice at the happy ending, because she woke up in that very novel. She could not be happy, because in 2 years everything would pass. Or rather, she would have to face this in the future in Ibelina's body. Before the heroine began to live as Ibelina, her true identity was completely different. The girl was in the hospital, corresponding with her mother, who told her she couldn't visit this week. And she also asked her to listen to the doctor and follow the recommendations. The patient again thought that she was once again a burden to her family. She had been in the hospital for a long time. They were probably just busy preparing to pay the hospital bills. The lady also wrote to her best friend asking if he had a day off. But now it was exam season, so the guy turned her down. But when all the exams were over, she should go see her best friend. She asked the girl to make sure to inform her when she would be discharged, and also to fight the illness so she could recover quickly. Actually, she got sick not because she wanted to, but because she was depressed, because she was sad and lonely, as if the whole world was slowly forgetting about her existence. The lady complained about this to the doctor because no one even came to visit her. The woman, in turn, suggested that the patient read books. The girl quickly became addicted to the novel the doctor lent her, even though she was in the hospital, and there was no one by her side. Magical stories unfolded for her in the novel. It seems this hospital patient has fallen asleep again. She hadn't seen any books before, thinking the doctor had brought it, but it was only the second volume, without the first one. But there was no difference, so the girl decided to read, as the title Iris suggests. This is the story of a girl named Iris. The second volume begins with Iris learning about the power she possesses, about the divine. At the same time, the divine power of Saint Ibelina disappears from the great temple. With the disappearance of the divine power, Ibelina felt uneasy and her evil deeds ceased. She attracted indecent men and drove away well-intentioned priests. Meanwhile, Iris used her power to help people and became close to the three main characters. And so the second volume ended with the false Saint Ibelina being burned at the stake. Even without reading the third volume, it was clear that it would most likely be about Iris and the three heroes seriously coming out. Very tired of reading, the girl wanted to sleep and lie down, after which she began to smell a strange odor, and a group of doctors gathered around her. Her consciousness clouded. When she opened her eyes, she saw a group of priests calling her Lady Saint Ibelina. She finally woke up, so everyone began to thank the Lord for this. After all, a week later, the saint finally woke up, so she tried to convey the news to other priests. But the heroine herself did not understand how this could happen. But if she concentrates, then the memories of Ibelina, or rather her body, do not arise naturally. It was the exact same girl she had read about in the novel. Approaching the mirror, the blonde woman was moved by her beauty. She had slender arms and legs, bright eyes and lips, soft golden hair. There was not a single feature that did not evoke sympathy, a healthy and beautiful body that the heroine could only dream of. After undressing in front of the mirror, the girl heard overly clear memories when she saw the marks on her chest. In fact, her breasts were covered in redness, more like erotic hickeys. She remembered the men with whom the false saint had run wild. She did not have a permanent partner. She did whatever she wanted with any man, no matter how many, in exchange for one night. Whether it was jewelry, gold coins, or supposedly, she gave them what they wanted. After the true Saint Iris finally appeared, there was not a single person who remained on Ibelina's side. But again, she had quite a violent temper, and in the end, the girl was burned at the stake. The lady had been sick for a long time, so she was powerless alone due to depression. But Ibelina, on the contrary, was a beautiful and healthy saint. As the girl bathed, she thought that being burned at the stake was not what she wanted. She couldn't just sit around and wait for such a terrible future. The characters most related to Ibelina's fate are the true saint, Iris, Templar Knights Captain Rathbun, and also the Crown Prince of the Empire, Leon, and even Aslan, the King of Mages. The saint realized that if she changed her relationship with them, she could correct Ibelina's ending. The blonde woman began to think about how to ensure that Ibelina's life would not end by being burned at the stake. She thought she could leave the temple and flee far away before Iris appeared. However, since Ibelina arrived at the temple at a very young age, the world outside the temple, of which she has no memory, may be more dangerous. Moreover, if the only saint in the world suddenly disappeared at this time, it would most likely cause chaos, and naturally, the Templars would be sent to look for her. There is nothing worse than running away and then being caught and dragged back. In any case, the only way to change the future is to be careful in your actions and improve your relationships with everyone, especially with the main character of the novel. But it was worth thinking about when exactly Iris would appear. As for the male characters who side with Iris, but it seems his relationship with him is already ruined. And a couple of days before moving into Ibelina's body, he went to battle in God's name, an incident that occurred during a large-scale expedition to pacify the demons on the outskirts of the continent. For several months, the knights achieved victories, praising the name of their god across the continent. But then, the captain was informed that they had finally overcome their last battle without any trouble, and all that was left was to return to the temple. Everyone is doing a great job, but we had to stay alert until the end. But suddenly, a huge demon attacked the captain from behind. He wounded one of the soldiers, so the man ordered the priests to help him. But the severity of the wounds was too high for their strength, so everyone thought that the saint would most likely help them. The captain asked the soldiers to hold on for a while, and he himself hurried to run. He ran with the wounded man towards the palace, who was bleeding. There he asked to call the saint as soon as possible. The wounded man was laid on a bed, and the captain, along with the priests, began to wait for the girl with divine power. The man whispered softly that he could no longer hold on because he felt hellish pain. Radbund simply did not understand why the blonde woman was not coming out. Suddenly, he was informed that before leaving for the expedition, something might have happened between him and the saint. Then, the lady shamelessly informed him that while the captain was away, other inferior knights would have to serve her. The black-haired man said that the purpose of this expedition was large demons, so he would not be there. The saint began to shout that this was insolence, because this man's duty was to serve the Holy Lady. Of course he must participate in the expedition, she said when the priests entered the hall. He was very grateful, but the girl stopped showing whims. But she promised that one day she would make him regret it for the rest of his life. Suddenly, the captain understood everything. He realized that those words from the saint, because of what happened that day, could influence today's expedition. A saint is a person who has been given the ability to serve God and use it for the good of the world. But at this moment, she refuses to heal a dying knight who was attacked by a demon. And all this just because he rejected her that day, even though the girl didn't even say what she wanted from the knight. The priest said that the blonde woman sent a message for Ratbun to kneel down and crawl to her bed. Everyone was surprised, but the man just asked to open the doors. When this happened, the saint was sitting on her bed, surrounded by men, and the captain crawled to her on his knees. He said that this was expected of a Templar captain, as he had lowered himself to such baseness for the sake of a mere subordinate. The man began to beg the blonde woman to save the vice-captain, to which the lady said that she simply could not ignore his sincerity while he was crawling towards her like a dog. After this, the vice-captain's life was saved. He could no longer wield his sword. In the end, he left the Templars and returned to his hometown. In the novel, Rathbun is a textbook example of a Templar who seeks nothing but noble honor. But instantly, the saint was informed that Priest Caro was requesting an audience with her. Caris was the head priest, and the lady remembered little about him. If she was going to live as Ibelina, she could not continue avoiding him. So, the girl seriously stated that she allowed him to enter. According to the memories, Ibelina was not friendly with Caris, and this solo meeting with him was exciting. If this were a real saint, it is unknown what she would have done. The man entered, knelt down, and presented his name before the saint. The lady looked at him with the greatest arrogance possible and asked what was wrong. He said that it seemed clear that she wanted to relax alone, speaking indifferently as if bored by him. The priest knew he was causing her trouble, as she had been sick for a long time. However, he wanted to hear a definitive answer from the Holy Lady in charge of the prayer meeting. This is the biggest event of the Great Temple, held only once a year. Only on this day will common people be able to see the saint with their own eyes. However, in the novel, Ibelina was not even present at this festival. So she replied that, moreover, she didn't remember very well what they asked of her at that moment. But the man invited her to include him in the prayer meeting, instead of the fallen high priest of Elon. The high priest does not get out of bed due to his advanced age. It seems the high priests are now competing for his position, but she feels this man should never be allowed to take his place. The girl said she wasn't completely sure yet, so he could go. But suddenly, the man shouted what the saint had promised him, asking if she was doing it on purpose, because she was not satisfied with the men he hired. After all, he selected the best men with the best faces and bodies, and sent them to the mistress. She knew she was having quite a bit of fun with them, but if 2 were not enough for her, the priest could send as many as she wanted. At that moment, the heroine remembered that those men ibelina received through Charis. She couldn't believe such a man was a priest, replying that she didn't need any men, so there was no point in bringing them anymore. The lady decided to think about it later. First of all, the most urgent matter was the prayer meeting. Ibelina refused to help prepare for the prayer meeting, so it's probably a complete mess right now. Besides, she was unconscious for a week. It was this prayer meeting that caused Ibelina's reputation to drop to the bottom. So from now on, the blonde woman will actively participate in the prayer meeting preparations. So the lady will definitely act safely by herself, but she didn't expect there to be so many documents. Also, there were too many clothes to choose from. The maids understood that it was difficult for a girl to check everything thoroughly at once, but a lot of work had accumulated over time. She was also informed that if she agreed with the prayer meeting plan, they would like her to try it just once. They trembled a lot and were scared by the conversation with the lady. But the saint smiled and asked to be taken to the indicated place. First, she will have to go to the central square. To realize her status as a saint more realistically, she should first go out onto the balcony. From there was an excellent view of the square where the territory was to be held. To think that this place would be filled with people coming just to see the saint. While looking at the scenery, the blonde woman suddenly saw a man and wondered who he was. But suddenly, everyone started making excuses, shouting that it was just a coincidence, and that Captain Radbun probably just didn't see her. So that person was Radbun. He is completely different from what she saw in the memories and read in the novel. It must have been because the saint felt guilty towards him, but her heart beat very fast, most likely out of fear. The priest swore that it was impossible for the commander not to see the lady, and this was simple rudeness. But the lady did not understand that if he really grabbed the knife and jumped here, she would not say anything to him because she herself did not know why the hell Ibelina did that. This felt even stronger when you personally met his angry gaze. If everything went like this, she would definitely be burned at the stake. First, the blonde woman must successfully hold a prayer meeting if she does not want to die. The saint collapsed onto the bed and shouted that everything was too hard. She has done a lot, because how long has it been since she could walk so freely? With her original body, there was no way the girl would feel so tired. Although she was tired, she was grateful for it. The lady did not want to return to her original body. She wanted to move a little more, walk a little more, and be useful. The priests were waiting for the saint outside the door, although she only wanted to take a walk alone. And she didn't want everyone following her every day. But suddenly, she remembered the secret passage. Behind the painting is the central square, and behind the mirror is the garden behind the house. The passage behind the bookshelf leads to the great temple, but the blonde wanted to go to the garden because there shouldn't be anyone there anymore. The door had no handle. It opened with the help of divine power. Probably, if the mistress touched it with the doors, it turned out that the divine power penetrated outside, opening the magic door. She used force, but had no idea how she did it. Opening it slightly, the blonde tried to enter slowly to be as quiet as a mouse, and no one would notice her. Thanks to divine power, this passage was quite bright. Now that I think about it, Ibelina had no divine power, and that's why she was accused of being a false saint and brutally murdered. In the book it was written that divine power gradually disappeared after Iris's appearance, but the reasons for this phenomenon have not been identified. So the reason for the disappearance of divine power, according to the heroine, was Iris herself, which might have something to do with this. Finally, the girl saw the same door that was in front of the entrance, and upon entering, she saw a marvelous garden. A slight breeze and the refreshing smell of trees hit the young woman's nose, and 2 bright moons and unusual fruits and flowers delighted the view with their excessive beauty. The beautiful and unknown world seemed to the blonde like a fairy tale she wanted to read and explore all the secrets of this place. It was time to return, but the lady decided to sit on the bench, even though she had a lot to do again tomorrow. But suddenly, looking at her thighs, the saint saw some strange marks. They looked like marks made intentionally. The strange thing was that the girl did not remember any of it, which scared her very much. There were too many lost memories. Something was wrong here, something she didn't know and wasn't written in the novel. Suddenly, her gaze cleared and a man was already kneeling. saying that he had come to serve his mistress by order of priest Karis. They hadn't told her in advance, but her predecessor had told her that the blonde liked to spend time in the garden often. In case she found her suddenly, the boy sneaked into the gardens. But then the lady herself appeared, which was God's will. Suddenly, the lady asked to leave and tell Karis to stop making this selection of men. But the man did not leave, taking the saint by the hand and shouting that he had gone to great lengths to come here. Suddenly, the stranger said that he had already heard stories about how the lady often changes her mind. But he asked to give him at least one chance. He said he could definitely satisfy the mistress, so the saint could entrust him with a gift. The blonde shouted at him to leave, but the man stared at her, announcing that he would do something that would clearly please her. The pervert asked to resist more, but he would never stop. He was too strong for the saint to push away, and she could only scream that she really didn't want any of this. Instantly, the girl fell somewhere among the flowers, and the man himself flew out somewhere. Thanks to someone's strength, in front of the lady was Radbun, who did his best to protect her. This feeling of fear could not be compared to what the blonde felt when he looked her in the eyes back then. Strong shoulders, hard muscles, large forearms, and huge hands, the captain had it all. The lady thought she could cut off his head with one hand, when suddenly she realized she was dressed too openly, and he could see the wrong person. But suddenly, he said it would be better if the lady did not show up. The man told her not to appear like that in front of other people, or told her not to appear in front of him. But it didn't matter, because he already despised the lady. What the lady is sure of is that Radbun will never forgive Ibelina. However, the blonde still bowed and thanked him for his help, but he only said he was glad the girl didn't say he had interfered with them. But the blonde thought everything would be much simpler if she punished him with her divine power. Whereupon Rathbun apologized. The man took the rapist in his arms and rushed to take him somewhere, and the lady could only follow him with her eyes. She thought that in the future, this savior would kill her with the same hands with which he saved her now. When the captain returned, everyone was surprised that he brought a stranger who somehow ended up in the temple. But everything was already clear. From his pretty face, it was clear that this man was going to the saint, to which Radbun asked to tie him up. And in the morning, when he came to his senses, to expel him from the temple, one of the priests was surprised by this order and asked why they weren't interrogating him. But when he said that if they develop a protocol, they will be able to announce it publicly, because all people must know the truth about that woman's atrocities. The guy was immediately captured. The captain ordered Siddle to watch his words, because when he joined the detachment of temple knights, he took an oath of allegiance. Whispering that he understood everything, the knight left the room. But at this, the man only ordered to watch him. In his office, Rathbone held his head in his hands and wondered what it was. A man with such an expression, he thanked him for his help, and who said these words is not exactly Saint Evelina, whom the captain knew. Sighing deeply, the brown-haired man tried to push away those thoughts by closing his eyes. He realized that it seemed that new documents had arrived for his approval. That is, a decree on security at a prayer meeting, and someone responsible for the saint's security needed to be chosen. In her office, the girl was surprised to learn that she needed to learn so many prayers. She learned the words that God watches the world from heaven. Soon all people will be filled with suffering. When she realized that everything had already been learned by the one who was in this body before her. Apparently, Ibelina was not so lazy. She remembered everything he taught today. In her childhood, she was told that God would be happy about this. At that time, she was very diligent. The girl said that priest Karis committed atrocities and surely wants to meet her. The blonde looked away and then asked to let him in and for everyone else to leave, because she couldn't avoid him constantly, and it was time to finally put an end to him. But he shouted that the saint couldn't do this to him because she named someone else, and not him, to be in charge of the prayer meeting, which is true. She chose a suitable person, another priest, whom everyone hated because he constantly gave advice to Evelina. But Karis said that all this time, he was devoted only to her. The blonde knew very well that he was still making a lot of effort for her, but she asked to take any prayer from this table and read the first line. The priest took it, and it was written there that God watches this world from heaven, and soon all people will be filled with suffering. Afterwards she took the paper, ordering him to say what happened next, so the man got nervous, because he could not say what was written there, since the saint had just taken the paper. To this, the girl said that all these prayers were intended to be used in a prayer meeting, and that she could not name a priest who did not know them to lead a prayer meeting. and she cannot pretend not to see this young man's efforts, so she will not set him aside for the meeting, but will give him a reward that will not bother him. Suddenly, he declared that he didn't need this reward, and then threw all the papers on the floor. The priest swore that the saint would greatly regret what she had done today, but she just bent down to pick up prayers from the floor. She thought that if she said it, he would retreat, but this would not happen. Everything became confusing when suddenly, the lady saw the security plan for the prayer meeting. This was the saint's annual personal protection, and he would be by her side all day. The commander of the night order, Rathbun, was excluded from the guard at the prayer meeting. The deputy commander is responsible for the saint's personal security, because it is quite natural that he doesn't want to be near Ibelina. In the novel, while Ibelina was a saint, Rathbun fulfilled his duty to the end. But now, the commander hates Ibelina to such an extent that no matter how hard he tries, it is impossible to change the outcome. The priest met with the saint. He informed her that today, finally, a 2-day prayer meeting was beginning, and asked if the girl had slept well. She replied that everything was fine, but in reality, the lady hadn't slept at all. The man understood that the girl was very nervous. So far, she had coped with everything for many years, and this year, she is sure that she will also succeed. Moreover, compared to her past years, the blonde prepared much more, and to be honest, this is the first time for her. If initially Ibelina had to gather all the people she met in the years before her death, then there wouldn't be more than 10 people, but now she suddenly finds herself in front of thousands, tens of thousands of people, at an event that everyone wants to attend at least once in their life. It is said that the poor from the outskirts take several weeks to arrive on foot, and when the saint pronounces the last word of blessing, a fierce battle begins for a place next to the saint. This is a world where God really exists, and when demons appear, divine power destroys them, and therefore, people believe in the power of God and trust him completely. So, with this faith, people travel such long distances just to get a closer look at the saint. That's why the lady would like to comfort them at least a little. The girl decided that she would definitely manage completely, for the sake of these people. She rehearsed everything dozens of times, and she is no longer a stranger in this world. There was no longer any need to be nervous about it. The blonde finally got ready, and even chose a good outfit. The priests declared that she was perfect. It was worth hurrying, because the prayer meeting would soon begin, but one of the priests had something to say. The senior priest asked worriedly what had happened. The saint immediately realized that the news was related to her. So that the boy wouldn't worry about telling the news, she told him that everything was in order, and that he could speak in front of her. The thing is that false rumors were spreading among the people, that the saint spent every night with different men. They say that the girl wastes her fortune and neglects her prayers and duties. Therefore, one incurs God's wrath. The blonde was surprised by such news, because this cannot be. Such things could not simply become known to the people. Everyone started denying it, but the lady said that everything stated was true, to which her servants declared that they would cancel the last program of the prayer meeting. The saint fell horrified, because that was the most important moment, the saint's blessing. Everyone was looking forward to this, and the blonde couldn't believe she had betrayed everyone. But since rumors spread very quickly, someone who wants to personally harm the lady might appear in the crowd. Moreover, Captain Rathbone will not be with her this year. She tried to do everything right. She really tried hard, but in the end, most likely, she could not avoid the predetermined end. At this, all the priests bowed and asked the saint for forgiveness. But despite this, the girl affirmed that all the programs would be carried out according to her plan. Whatever the outcome, it is too important. Even if it's just her futile attempts to do something, she will do whatever is necessary. Leaving the room, the blonde saw the commanders of the temple knights in the doorway. He bowed to her and said he would accompany the saint. But suddenly, he remembered that Rathbone was originally the kind of person who did his utmost to fulfill his duties. And no matter how much he hates the saint, he will protect her now. His hand was very large and warm compared to the girl's hand. In this case, the blonde asked to be looked after. They held hands and stepped forward as a sign that the event would take place. At this event, the nun blew a special trumpet, calling all the priests. After this beautiful sound, everyone realized that the saint was coming out into the world with her escort. They were all singing that the gaze of God had come to this earth, and they, along with the people, were receiving this wonderful grace and great love. This was where her place was, the saint's place. The lady looked around and noticed how many people had come to receive her blessing. The hopes and love of all these people How could all this be an empty phrase for Evelina? No matter how difficult it was for her, she never showed it. Like a kind adult, she had to remain calm and always try not to contradict the expectations of others. However, Evelina considered all this unworthy of her attention. The girl couldn't understand how this could happen, because all these people were willing to love her so much. The lady worried in vain. Everyone greeted the saint joyfully. The priest said that the last part of the program would soon arrive, and the blonde needed to go to the stairs. Her guard took the girl's hand. Everything was fine, even if he constantly held her. It seems that because today might be dangerous, he is indeed a man who performs his duty perfectly. The lady was told that she didn't have to bless everyone, that she could just pass by them, as she did last year. But she refused, when suddenly she saw a woman asking the saint to bless her son. Because it took 2 months to get to this place, there were so many people with serious illnesses. Divine power can heal wounds and poisonings, but illnesses given by nature cannot be cured. These people shouldn't know, and they came here seeking comfort. And she also wanted to hear at least one kind word. The man tried to persuade the lady not to go to a crowd of people, because it could be dangerous, but she stubbornly wanted to bless her grandfather. In this case, the blonde asked Captain Radbun to bring the man, but the grandfather himself shouted that the saint and dirty prostitute. The man held this old man with his hand, trying to take him towards the girl, but he claimed that he knew how the saint rolled around with men in the temple every night. But suddenly, to protect the girl, Radbun takes her under his protection and orders him to capture that scoundrel. Everyone started discussing these rumors that many men received gifts from the saint. The atmosphere instantly changed, and even those who doubted were now convinced of it. They shouted at her that she couldn't hide behind the temple knights for long, but she thought that everything was going well. But in the end, everything failed, just like in the novel. Whatever the lady does, everything follows the plot of the novel. In this case, the girl had nothing left to do. The blonde approached this old man and asked if he still wanted to receive a blessing from her. She decided that she would do what she wanted, so the old man hid his hood, and it turned out that he was rotting inside. Even in the most difficult times, and even in the happiest moments, God will always be by your side. Receiving his blessing, it is at every moment when he wills. The saint prayed to God to give strength to this old man, but he just smiled and thanked the girl, and she was surprised by his voice. In the end, it turned out that judging by the voice, this is not an old man at all. The man kissed her hand and told her that he would look forward to the day they met again. The knight said that the saint suddenly started working hard, and they were sure she was faking it. Given her usual behavior, soon these dirty rumors will spread throughout the continent. But in the history of the Great Temple, there has never been such shame, because the saint is openly called a girl of easy virtue. The lady was sitting in the garden, listening to all the nonsense the men were talking about, when suddenly the conversation turned to the priest of the ceremony, Commander Ratbun. But suddenly, they left and decided to go prepare for tomorrow's prayer meeting, and the saint curled up and began to cry silently. She thought she had just gone out for some fresh air, but the rumors bother her even at home. The blonde lay down on the bench, saying that this cannot be explained, because Evelina cannot be a prostitute if it was her, and not the men, who paid for the night with a man with money and jewels. She simply didn't understand what she should do now, because today she was really scared. And she did not expect this from Radbund. The commander told her that everyone who created chaos at the meeting was caught, and they were locked in dungeons. The blonde took a cup of tea and thanked him, taking the position of the victim. Suddenly, Radbund knelt down and declared that he could not fulfill his duty, and that he was ready to take responsibility, because dirt was thrown in the saint's eyes, to which the blue-eyed woman replied that it was her mistake for asking the man for an unnecessary request. But he did not give up, whispering that no matter what the reason, it was his responsibility that the mistress was injured. The man directly stated that this was his responsibility. To this, the girl didn't know what to say, but the answer was determined, and the lady must say what she wants to hear. The blonde exclaimed that she understood the knight, and that, to begin with, she would fulfill her duty without any changes until the end of tomorrow's prayer meeting. Radbund shouted that by not punishing him, the saint was tolerating him. The girl ordered him to leave, explaining that it was an order. Blue Eyes couldn't sleep for a long time, thinking that the man really demanded punishment because he was a simple person. Moreover, she was worried about who the man was and for what purpose he was disguised. He said they would meet again, but strangers couldn't see the saint freely, and this was very suspicious. But the lady did not feel threatened by him. The lady woke up and screamed that she had to return to her room. Upon fully waking up, she realized she was already in her room. But she remembered exactly that she fell asleep in the garden, when suddenly she realized she had already fallen asleep. But the girl was able to participate in today's ceremony after lunch, and the priest was glad that the lady looked rested today. Indeed, the blonde felt fine, but still asked if she had been carried to the room. Suddenly, the man was horrified to realize that the lady might be leaving the room. No one knew she was leaving. She probably returned through a secret passage. The priest asked if the girl would like to check the offering first before the ceremony. Immediately after the ceremony, she would have an audience with representatives from each country. Divine power is the power to fight monsters. The closer the country is to the great temple, the safer it is from monsters. And the temple sends high priests to the farthest countries to protect people. Therefore, in every country, there is a tradition of sending offerings of gratitude to the great temple during the celebration of the prayer meeting. She just needed to review the offerings and then express her gratitude in return. When the blonde came out, she saw two types of offerings sent by each country. The first are grain products, wine, fruits, healing herbs, and other necessities for the people gathered at the prayer meeting. And second, it is dedicated only to the saint, or rather, it is a different kind of jewelry. She knew that modest gifts were given to express gratitude, but this didn't look like a modest gift. The blonde understood that all this was not for the sake of faith, but simply for the saint. The lady became very angry, shouting who was that fool who sent so much junk as an offering, shouting that she needed jewelry. Those were the memories the saint had. They tried to explain to her that there was no point in saying bad words, because Laris was a poor country, and a lot of time and effort was spent creating such a tapestry. The blonde loved mocking believers so much that she took a torch and burned the gift they brought her. She said she didn't care. Ibelina ordered not to send anyone to that country again, which the beating saint was ashamed of. She held her head in shame. Suddenly, they gave her a precious stone, the offering of which was sent by Laris. Everything looked incredibly expensive, but the girl remembered that she had said that was a very poor country, and she realized that it was sent with a request for help. The blonde ordered this offering to be returned to them, but the priest suddenly declared that it was dangerous to leave Laris this time. But the saint said that she understood everything and asked to send temple knights to them. She also suggested increasing the number of knights sent, because last year must have been difficult for them. Tears appeared in the man's eyes. He bowed and thanked the lady. The lady didn't quite understand where so many offerings were being sent from. According to what she was told, they were all sent by the Perilous Empire. The second main male character of the novel is from this country. The Aphelian Empire is a country whose power has grown rapidly. After the emperor ascended the throne several decades ago, he conquered many countries in the war, and now it has taken control of the entire country, territory around the Great Temple. Due to religious beliefs, they cannot touch the temple, and therefore they consider it an abomination. Along with the current old emperor, the empire is actually run by Crown Prince Leon. He is the second male laid in this novel. The influence of the Great Temple was supposed to pass into his hands, just as his father taught him. For the time being, the Empire and the Great Temple are in a position of confrontation. And in the original story, Ibelina was furious that the Empire sent huge amounts of offerings to the people, but sent nothing to her. But for some reason, the course of history changed a lot, and gifts were still sent to the lady. The Empire sent not only jewelry, but also sculptures, paintings, and objects for ceremonies. Everything the temple needed. The blonde said that she could see all the offerings herself. She was completely confused, thinking that perhaps she had missed something in the novel. There was also the question of why Ibelina only asked for jewelry. The saint was not at all interested in such things. She must have simply gifted it as payment for spending the night with men. It seems the girl deliberately tried her best to be hated, no matter what. Now the blonde will do everything in her power. She will return everything from the offerings and review the official letters. There were many, and the letters themselves looked luxurious. Among them, there was a strange letter, on the outside of which nothing was indicated. It said that since the deal was closed, someone would soon come to visit. This was suspicious, and the lady did not understand if it was really sent by the saint, because it is a very strange way of speaking, and it is unknown who the sender is. Taking the paper in her hand, the girl felt intense pain. She bit her finger, and suddenly her desk with the papers started burning with fire. This letter immediately disappeared, as if the devil himself had taken it away. There was no trace of fire left, and the blonde at first thought it was her imagination. But looking at her finger, the saint realized that everything was real because she had a cut. And in that case, it was magic. Unlike divine power, magic in this world is rejected. This magic is so strong that it can tempt anyone. But it is this power that is the source of monsters. But who could use such dark power to send a letter to the great temple? Most likely, it was the magic king of the northern part of the continent, the third main male character, Aslan. This was strange because in the original story, Aslan only started acting after meeting Iris. Suddenly, while the lady was thinking that something had gone against the plot, the saint was called again. The priest asked if there was any problem with the offerings. The lady asked if the ceremony was going well, to which she was told that everything was going according to plan, so that in half an hour she could go out in public. Rathbone appeared in the room, and the saint noticed that he had changed his cloak. The girl suddenly thought that it was because of her attack that the man ruined his outfit. She tried to apologize because she didn't believe her square would become useless. But the brunette said that he didn't even notice, which made the blonde even more worried. However, the saint announced that he could rest assured, as there would be no blessings today, so no one would throw eggs. In that case, the priest said that while the lady waited, he would bring her tea. When the cup of drink was brought, the girl said that this tea was delicious because she drinks it all the time. But in reality, it had no special taste, so Ibelina was confused, and she didn't even know what to say. The maid smiled, thinking that the saint liked this tea since she had chosen it herself. Suddenly, the girl was told it was time to go out, but she suddenly started losing consciousness. A day earlier, the commander was on the balcony and thought that he didn't know what to feel about his lover. When he thought about the work of the vice captain, he could not forgive him. But as commander of the knights, Radbun has no choice but to do his duty. He couldn't understand from what moment everything went wrong, before the captain was injured, or when he was humiliated for no particular reason. The man did not remember exactly when this happened. Come to think of it, when they were still children, they definitely got along well. Walking and thinking about everything, the brunette didn't even realize how he arrived at the garden. Looking at the plants among them, Radbun noticed that there was a sleeping girl, apparently sleeping herself. The man was shocked by what the saint was doing in the garden, even though they were not allowed to go outside. He concluded that it was unlikely that she had communicated with anyone from the outside. This was not his duty as a knight, so it was time for him to return. However, he heard the saint's voice, thinking she had woken up and approaching her. He noticed that the lady took her cloak and cuddled up like a kitten. Someone's voices began to be heard from behind the forest, and Rathbone realized that the saint would be in trouble. If they run into someone while in this position, there will be consequences. The brunette began to try to wake up the lady, because someone was already walking in their direction. Article 1, Paragraph 3 of the Rules of the Temple Knight Order. It was impossible to touch the saint's body without her permission. But taking her in his arms, he decided to take her to a safe place. The knights decided to sit on the bench, so it was necessary to escape as quickly as possible. It was truly a beautiful night, as people said. The news of the secret passage is passed down from generation to generation, only to the captains of the knights, and to the saint. However, the saint thinks that only she knows about this passage. The captain should only use it if it is a real emergency. Unlike a saint, a man has very little divine power, so he should not use it without thinking. Ratbun's conscience twisted him for secretly sneaking into the saint's room. The man entered and laid the girl on her bed, but he clutched his head in time, wondering what he was doing, because all his actions were against the rules. He broke many rules and did not understand what he was thinking at that moment. Having decided that he needed to return quickly, Rathbun left the girl's room. His cloak was all wrinkled, and he needed to change quickly. But the lady suddenly announced that the man had changed his cloak for some reason. She simply asked not to pay attention to him, because she would no longer succumb to the saint's influence. When the blonde lost consciousness, she saw her arms emaciated to the bone. These were not Ibelina's hands. She was a real heroine. She didn't understand how it happened, when she suddenly saw the real Ibelina in front of her. The girl asked what this mentally ill girl was doing. The girl started making excuses, saying she was very sorry. The blonde just laughed, while the depressed woman tried to explain to her that she did not intentionally inhabit someone else's body. Taking this brown-haired woman by the chin, the saint said that she was the one who brought her into this world. The heroine was very surprised that it was the character from the book who decided to give her body away. She threw the girl to the ground, saying that she deliberately chose the stupidest one, and that the lady would still decide to joke about the saint, even though she herself lives such an insignificant life. The girl shouted that she had worked very hard, but precisely because, for some reason, she is doing this useless work, the blonde told the lady to live without worries, adding more fun to her life. This was incredible nonsense, because the saint told her to lead a dissolute lifestyle. The girl suddenly started asking why Ibelina was doing this. Was it really on purpose? She didn't understand why the blonde needed everyone to hate her, to which she replied that it didn't matter if she liked something or not, but this body was sacred, and no one would dare to interfere in her way. The blue-eyed girl said that the saint is an untouchable creature. The Korean girl shouted that this is not the case, even though this girl is a saint. No, Ibelina still does not know the end of this story, the tragic end in which her place will be taken away, and they will burn her at the stake. The lady decided that she would not deliberately aggravate the situation, so she said that they were throwing mud at her, even though she was a saint. She only recalled with disgust that it was at a damn prayer meeting. But suddenly, she grabbed the girl by the shoulders and asked why she let Radbint go so easily, because she should have cut off his head, because he could not protect the saint. The patient asked why Ibelina hated this man so much and what he did wrong, to which she announced that he really did nothing. That's the problem. The lady threw her aside, saying that it was not his fault at all, and she made a big mistake, because it was better for her to find another soul instead of the heroine. A free soul, faithful to her desires and whims. She is definitely determined. The body that the girl received for no reason may suddenly lose it at any moment. It seems that everything will end like this. The blonde suggested that the lady must like this body, or she didn't want to die so much so that the saint could give it back to her. But in return, there was a condition. The girl was ready for anything. If it wasn't murder, because it is still impossible to do it in this body, a saint cannot kill people. Whether it's someone else or yourself, there is no way she can do it by herself. Besides, it wasn't fun at all, and since it happened like this, the lady should do something funny. To start with, it was worth spending the night with a man, and the deadline for completing this task was 1 week. The blonde laughed and said that if she didn't meet the deadline, she would kick her out immediately. Ibelina asked to remember that she monitors the outside world. Upon waking up in her bed, the saint screamed that she needed to return somewhere. Everyone was happy that the saint had regained her senses, but she still had to remain calm. She barely recovered her senses after 3 days and should have been more careful, which surprised Ibelina because only 4 days remained. The girl heard Ibelina's voice, and it turned out that the time she was unconscious was also counted when the blonde ate in bed. Again, after a long time, she felt like a patient. She never wanted to return to that terrible moment. The life that the saint had enjoyed so much in recent weeks was free to walk with her feet wherever she wanted, and she appreciated the wonderful feeling of fatigue after a day of work. And now Ibelina could lose all of this. The blonde didn't want to lose this for anything, but she toyed with the idea of having to spend the night with a man. She didn't even understand how she could do it, but Radbond was nearby and wouldn't let her think. He said that they still couldn't determine why the saint lost consciousness, so he apologized. The man doubted the tea the girl drank, but as a result of the investigation, it was confirmed that it did not contain poison. However, in the course of the investigation, they received additional investigations. They found out that the commotion at the prayer meeting was caused by Father Chorus. The girl asked how the prayer meeting went, to which they told her that everything ended well, and that she shouldn't worry too much. But some people believe that the saint suddenly lost consciousness and did not participate in the prayer meeting under the pretext of being sick, which dates back to the original story. But did something really happen to the original Ibelina that day, contrary to rumors? But suddenly, the lady remembered that she was supposed to meet the delegation, but they were told that they had also returned. The delegation also thought that the saint made an excuse because she didn't want to meet them. And now the blonde has nothing to do. However, there is still someone asking for an official meeting with her. The girl asked who would like to meet her, but the priest said that person was the Aphelius Empire. His Highness called the blonde boy to his place. Leon, the son of the emperor himself, found this boy. His Majesty ordered his son to enter the temple and find out what was going on there, to which he replied that he did not want to. To be honest, the boy thought it was quite boring, but his father insisted that Leon did not have any particularly important things to do these days, and he had just finished conquering Ischia. And that was the point. The blonde's blood was still boiling, and he could barely spy on the temple. The man asked him if he knew that the relationship between the saint and the captain of the knights was on the verge of disaster. The son knew, but he thought their informants had encouraged them to do so. But recently, the girl's behavior has changed. And that's not all. The captain's position has also become uncertain. Blue Eyes suggested that they should try to motivate him themselves. And now, the emperor was completely sure that his heir was determined to go there. He also remembered that, if necessary, any means of defense can be used. His Highness bowed, saying he was following the emperor's orders. The commander of the Radbun Temple Knights was the strongest knight on the continent, as people said, but Leon himself had never met him. But if this is true, then he must belong to the empire. After all, this knight deserves more than a temple. And if he finally fights with the saint, the blonde will draw him to his side. So it was worth hurrying up with the implementation of his plan. The brunette was surprised that Leon was going to ire with the delegation, but it was not official. So it was worth preparing fake IDs, to which he tried to explain that if Leon poisoned himself this way, then nothing good would come of the ceremony. Representatives from every country would come, and they would start brandishing their swords. The counselor also suggested that this time, the heir to the empire wants to meet the saint. In this case, it's even cool, because the boy thought it was time to take a break from the imperial ladies. Because they say the saint is very beautiful, but Leon is not one of those people who likes to admire only her face. Of course, he has no aversion to beautiful women. He prefers interesting women. The more dangerous, the better. However, according to reports, she is just a dissolute and ill-tempered maiden. Therefore, the future emperor was not interested at all. Despite his words, he still wanted to meet the blonde, because the situation had changed. Because the guy suddenly found out that Commander Radbun was no longer protecting the saint. According to informants, it was so, and it would seem that the situation has worsened, but on the contrary. It's good. Insert 1 or 2 more wedges, and that's it. Speaking of the saint, the blonde wanted to make sure to change men every night. Tom wondered if she would like the blue-eyed blonde, meaning himself. There were no women in the empire who didn't like Leon, but the counselor was more surprised when he suddenly started flirting. But before starting to flirt with her, the blonde should look at her at least once. It was then, at the prayer meeting, that old man, with a disgusting stench in his ears and rotten skin, it was Leon himself who was observing everything that was happening. He watched the relationship between Radbun and Ibelina and realized that they even dared to hold hands. Although this relationship is on the verge of disaster, so Leon was worried if they had spent the night together. It was that blue-eyed blonde who caught the moment when many people from such a large number of nations started calling the saint a dirty prostitute. But still, seeing a beautiful girl who, despite all the insults, flew towards him, he asked her, like a real grandfather, if she wanted to receive his blessings. The man had no answers as to how such a woman could, in such a situation, approach a dirty old man, and stinking from illness. This gave the idea that the saint was completely different from what was written about her in the report. His Highness was very curious about her true image. And finally, the long-awaited news arrived that the saint had agreed to an official reception. Finally, Leon arrived at the temple and came face to face with the blonde. The priest announced that the temple demands that the representative of the empire, Perilous, maintain decorum. But suddenly, despite all the boundaries, the man approached the girl, frightening her. He knelt down and kissed the lady's hand, whose voice and gaze he only remembered. The girl suddenly realized that Leon was the same old man at the prayer meeting. Despite the saint's shock, the future emperor smiled and said that he was Leon Havel Perilous. That is, the crown prince of the empire Perilous, at first glance, seems stupid, but he is actually a careful strategist, and also a rabid war fanatic. The boy announced that this time he really did the right thing by visiting the temple, not understanding why he hadn't come to visit the girl sooner. If the blonde had known that the crown prince would be here, she would never have met him, because the empire only maintains courtesy on the outside, but in reality it is directed at the temple. All the priests also seemed worried. It was very rude to appear like this, so the man said he was very worried because he had behaved with disdain towards the temple, since he was always glad that they finally met. He also apologized for not informing the lady earlier. He thought it would be difficult for him to be present here, because he was very busy with imperial affairs. But fortunately, the blonde had finished his schedule and was able to quickly join the delegation. This was a blatant lie. because such a busy person cannot appear disguised at a prayer meeting. Even if there is no evidence of it, this is an obvious lie. The man seemed to say with his look that even if it was a lie, the saint would do nothing. Blue Eyes stated that the empire's best craftsmen, various jewels and precious stones, were sent to the temple as donations, and the lady left without taking any of this, so she concluded that the saint was not to his liking. All the priests noticed that this was very cheeky, because this insolent man was openly sarcastic towards the saint. Most likely, this boy deliberately provoked the girl. If it had been the real Ibelina, she would have immediately declared war on them. The blonde proudly stated that even if so, she would give it to him after the meeting. But since jewels and precious stones are not among the offerings that the temple can accept, the saint will return everything completely to the empire. She made a gesture with her hand, after which her servants began to carry away kilos of gifts. The blue-eyed girl laughed that the prince should not worry about the wheat and the grape wine that he sent for the people, as all were received with gratitude and used. In fact, Leon had prepared in advance, but this was not a fleeting persistence or deception. So the girl concluded that their conversation had come to an end. Getting up from her seat, the saint set off so as not to cross paths with this prince again. But she instantly jumped up, wanting to grab the blonde by the hair, when suddenly Ratbun stood between them. The man said that now was the time to prepare for the next meeting, to which the blonde addressed Prince Leon. That as he saw, his time was running out, so at that moment the girl would say goodbye. The blue-eyed one blessed him with peace on his way back to the empire. For Leon, Ibelina remained a beautiful and interesting woman. But suddenly, the man still took the lady's hand and gave her the final answer. He said that he intended to stay in the temple, that the saint herself, whom the priests did not understand what was happening and were simply surprised by such brazenness from the empire's representative. But the prince explained that during the time he worked for the empire, he committed many sins. Therefore, he decided that repentance and worship are the most necessary things for a person like him. That is why Leon wants to stay in the temple a little longer, because he wants to saturate himself with the saint's overflowing grace, to such an extent that all his sins are washed away with holy water. The man said that next time he would appreciate it if the saint spent a little more time with him. After all this, the blonde thanked Rathbun for his help. In fact, she had nothing else on her schedule. She knew that he was worried about the lies they were telling, because this was not typical of Rathbun. This is how he must be fulfilling his duty as a commander knight. It would not be good for the meeting between the saint and the crown prince of the empire to be prolonged. Radbund declared that his feelings told him that he was not a very good person, and that the saint would be better off staying away from him. The saint did not remember that the man had such a character, that he was ready to directly show his emotions. But suddenly, seeing the smile on the blonde's face, the knight bowed, and he apologized for crossing the line, although the lady appreciated his concern for her. It's just that that casual conversation with Radbund makes her a little happy. If this continues, then maybe the girl can change the ending by herself. Unless everything ends in 4 days. The lady stated that the captain did a good job today, and believes that she no longer needs security for today. Until then, if the conditions proposed by Ibelina are not met, everything the heroine has done, all her efforts will come to an end. Since the saint had finished all her affairs for the day, the servants decided to prepare a bath for her, but she immediately refused to rest and asked him to take the accumulated cases to her office. Sitting at work, Ibelina remembered her true self, who shouted that the saint should not do this useless work. She understood that Ibelina had objected to this before. The girl hates doing the work of a saint. However, this was not part of the conditions, so it is up to her to decide what to do and what not to do. The blonde took into account that she only had 4 days left before completing her tasks. The lady cannot stand this unless she does something. She didn't know where to get her a man, and damn it, why is she being forced to do this? Because the girl has never held the hand of a real man and now has to spend the night with him. She assured herself that now she had to work more and more so as not to think about anything. The official list of candidates for the position of high priest has arrived. There were names that Ibelina had never heard of, but when she saw a Carl on the lists, her whole body trembled and she started to break out in a cold sweat. It wasn't her, it was Ibelina's state of excitement. The blue-eyed girl did not understand who Carl was and why she was so afraid of him. He is a little different from Karis. He is somewhat darker and gloomier. 2 days left. Ibelina's voice sounded like a morning alarm clock. In the morning, the saint was already greeted by a priest who had heard that she went to bed late yesterday. But she replied that she had slept enough and thanked him for his concern. Yesterday, on the list of candidates for the position of high priest, she saw the name of Father Karl, but the man only admired the fact of being on the list. He said he missed her because he hadn't been in her area for a long time. Apparently, Karl is very kind-hearted. If you think about it, Ibelina led almost all the conscientious priests to the outskirts. She asked if the blonde considered Karl a priest. Although he is a little young, he definitely does not have a single flaw. At such a young age, he became a respected high-ranking priest, because even a saint followed him once. This means that Ibelina did not send him away, but in any case, it would be good for the lady to ask for his return, regardless of whether Father Karl himself wanted to go there. Even if he does not become the high priest, he will be of great help to the great temple. But the lady still felt tired, so she would like to rest a little longer alone. The priest suddenly announced that he should have guessed first and also apologized. But the trembling in his hands did not leave Ibelina's body, making her feel cold and fear. She couldn't even guess what happened to Father Karl. Although this is quite obvious to Ibelina, she probably got close to people like Karis, and she heard something very unpleasant directed at her from Father Karl. Despite such a strong reaction, for some reason Ibelina could not say anything. She simply pretended that she could see every moment. The saint was offered to rest, but she said there was no need to worry, that if she got tired, she would rest again. In fact, on the contrary, she is happy to have a lot of work. Turning her attention to the desk, the lady saw the seal of a fell and realized that it was sent by Crown Prince Leon. She started thinking about what he might have put in this envelope, when suddenly it crumbled into many sakura petals. It was very beautiful, considering the petals began to spin in the air. The saint suddenly thought about the nonsense he might have written to her in the letter, but it was written there that Leon was very surprised when he arrived at the great temple along with the priests. And this morning, they told him that there is one thing in the empire that women hate most of all. The lady read this letter with a smile, when she suddenly realized that she had just laughed at the crown prince's letter. They told her that her ability to charm people was amazing, and indeed it was. And furthermore, his experience with women was very impressive. However, despite his numerous adventures with women, none of them gave him a child. This meant that Leon was quite a cautious person. With a terrifying person like him, it was impossible for anything to go according to his plan. The blonde himself had already asked 27 times if a reply letter from the saint had arrived, but she gave no reply. The man thought it was because he was the crown prince of the empire. The situation became very confusing just because of Leon's statement. The prince thought the reply letter would arrive soon, when suddenly the window broke, and a man entered. He did not expect not to receive the letter, so he grabbed the corpse of a young man. Most likely, he came to deliver a reply letter because Leon had a plan, since the crown prince of the empire has quietly established himself in one place. Then this is an opportunity that no one can miss, and it would be foolish if he said that no one other than the temple knights was forbidden to have daggers in their possession. The advisor promised that he would do his best. However, the young man's expectations were not met, and now he cannot wait. The man's heart beat with anticipation. He thought that war and women were an uncontrollable pleasure. Now the time had come to get down to business more thoroughly. The current influence of the great temple must pass into the hands of the empire. It would be easier to take everything by force, but then the people will vehemently resist. Instead, Leon will lower the status of the saint, the symbol of the great temple, and attract the commander of the temple knights, Radbun, by his side. If the great temple loses its sword and shield, it will collapse. He was lucky that Ibelina was an easygoing woman with many flaws. Thanks to this, even a small rumor can turn into a big scandal. Soon the reaction will follow, no matter what he does. This place will definitely end up at the feet of the empire. Or there is an easier way to do it. Perhaps, as happened with Leon's mother, it is worth putting an end to this. Give her a marriage proposal and a wedding gift, for which Leon's mother only cursed her father, her mother's country, which resisted until the end. It finally joined the empire through marriage. It wouldn't be bad if this method worked with the great temple, so the man wondered if the saint could marry. It seems that physical integrity is not important to the saint, the blonde thought upon suddenly seeing Commander Ratbun. He heard that his faith and devotion are so deep that he is willing to easily sacrifice his life for the great temple of the saint. The moment a man sees the true face of the saint, he will give up his status as captain of the Temple Knights without any regret. The guy approached the commander and told him he was very happy to have met him. Furthermore, he wanted to say something, but he didn't understand why the man seemed so hostile. The girl woke up to Evelina's voice in her head, announcing that she had 1 day left. The last routine, the last work, the path of the great saint, is coming to an end. The priest said that it seems the lady has almost finished all urgent matters, and she might be done for today. She wanted to work even more, but the servant said that the blonde might lose consciousness again, so they left her in the room. The blue-eyed one was very afraid that she would leave soon, but she remembered that she still had some time. She wanted to run away, when suddenly she realized that she didn't even have anywhere to go. The girl suddenly wondered what it would be like to die a second time. If it would hurt or if the blonde would just disappear. Time was running out and Evelina still didn't know anything. Strange marks on her thigh gave the saint no peace. Who was Father Karl? And why was Evelina like this? She couldn't take much work and was an annoying woman. If the blonde told her that they would burn her again, then perhaps she would give him more time. She will tell you that at the moment of death, there will be no one by her side, and that everyone will rejoice at her death. Tears appeared in her eyes just thinking about it, so the lady wanted to keep busy, because she would really die like this, thinking about these terrible things. Deciding that the saint could no longer bear this, leaving the room, the girl rushed to run. The blonde shouted not to follow her, and the priests could never catch up to her. As she ran towards the unknown, she was too scared, because only 1 hour was left. The blue-eyed one wanted to live so much that she shouted that Evelina had nothing to regret in her life. Therefore, she didn't understand why she couldn't just give it up. Tears flowed like a river, either from fear or a strong desire to live. Evelina's condition stated that it didn't matter who it was, so right now the saint must find someone. Suddenly, the blonde heard someone's voice, the voice of someone who noticed her crying. It was Leon, who approached and asked what holy Evelina was doing here. The man approached her again and asked what the girl was doing here at such a late hour. He noticed that the blonde was crying, so he offered to be her sounding board for a while. He didn't know what happened to the girl, but he would like to comfort her. Her room is nearby. The man immediately warned that he has no second intentions, so there is nothing to worry about, because he uses this room with his assistants. Lost in thought, the lady took the blonde's hand, telling him she disagreed with him. Taking Leon's hand, Evelina led the prince somewhere, without letting go of his hand. The rooms on this side are mainly used as accommodation for delegations, so most of them are now empty. The commander asked what the situation was with the crown prince. They told him that, just as he had said, they had reinforced security near the prince's room, to which Rathbun ordered to make sure that an unpleasant situation like yesterday would not happen again. Leon Havel Ophelius is a man whose true intentions are unknown. Everyone knows the fact that the Empire is aiming for the Great Temple, and in such a situation, he thinks he can shamelessly stay in the Great Temple. The man wondered what the prince could be doing, when suddenly he realized that he was more annoyed by the fact that he was interfering with the saint. If there is no direct harm to the saint, then there is no point in interfering. Therefore, the commander asked, thinking about it, isn't Siddle in charge of guarding the saint today? To which the boy replied that he canceled tonight's schedule, saying he would be in the room relaxing alone. The knight did not understand, but for some reason arrived at the saint's room. We had to return when suddenly the priests shouted thank God. Rathbun was nearby. They said the saint had gone somewhere. They had to watch her, so they apologized because she said not to follow her. She screamed as terribly as before, so Rathbun had to understand what would happen if they didn't obey her, to which the man asked to keep this a secret and volunteered to help in the search for the saint. The girl, in turn, led the prince to that same room and closed the doors behind her. Suddenly, the saint said very strange things, or rather asked to sleep with him, and to the child's shock, she replied that she really did not want to. But Leon just took the girl by the waist and asked what she would do if he suddenly refused. The man supposed that the blonde would run out into the street and look for someone else, but the long-haired one had no idea why he would care. The prince said he had heard rumors, but he did not believe that the blue-eyed girl was so brave. Realizing that the time given by the true saint was already running out, the girl simply said that if Leon agreed, then he should act faster. The man said he had no idea that the lady could be so impatient, so he grabbed her by the cheeks and instantly kissed her. When her lips were covered by someone else's, Evelina covered herself with red paint, and she froze because it was her first kiss. When she read it in a book, It seemed more tender and deep, but now everything is different. It felt like her partner was trying to eat her, but instantly claimed that she had heard that the saint had quite a bit of experience in this. The blonde smiled and apologized, because it seems the lady is not what they say she is. But she only asked to start faster and without foreplay. The prince noticed that the lady was trembling and shaking all over, which was the same. But it seemed like it was her first time. Taking her in his arms, the man laid her on the bed and asked if she would regret choosing him. Taking off his outer robe, the blonde began to kiss her neck, making her feel strange. Rathbun kept trying to find the girl, not understanding why he was so worried about her. Meanwhile, in the process of fulfilling her task, the saint heard Ibelina's voice saying that these are the conditions, and there is no need to cry. The lady understood that at that moment, the true heroine was watching them. Suddenly, the set signal sounded in the girl's ears. Time was finally up, but the heroine was still alive, and everything finally ended. And she had to return. The saint suddenly pushed him away from her, but he continued to tease and embarrass her. The man asked if the blonde really planned to finish everything at once, but she abruptly started pushing him away from her. Thanking the prince for his help, the girl expressed her regret and quickly left his chambers. She understood that right now, with her whole body, she felt alive and it was still her body. But in an instant, the long-haired girl turned around and noticed that Leon was running after her, when suddenly she didn't notice and bumped into Radbond. Seeing the man, the blonde became even more overwhelmed with fear of hopelessness. Seeing the crimson marks on the saint's chest, the man became furious and realized whose hands they were. Radbond thought that Leon had done this by force, so he drew a sword, and he wanted to personally punish the culprit, to which the girl asked not to do this. She said it was a misunderstanding, and that she was just heading to her room. The lady covered her face with her hands and asked both men to leave her alone. The commander, in turn, took the lady in his arms, offering to carry her to the room, and also announced that this was a matter, not just leave her. Instantly, the blonde realized that it wasn't even a trap, as the girl defended him. But he did not understand what had happened, because the saint had definitely abandoned him and had fled. She protected him from an attack by the knight captain. His offer was tempting, and the man accepted it. Leon forever remembered that face, that scent, and that feeling. The prince had never felt this way before, and it seemed that, until the blonde made her his, this thirst would never disappear. After all these adventures, the blonde decided to take a bath. Bath soap, towels, a modest but clean and tidy bath, like the owner's character. Because the girl came to Radbun's apartment and took a bath, but she could not go to her room immediately like that. The lady suddenly realized that not everything was as bad as she thought. Although it hurt a little, like muscle soreness after training, everything was fine. Thanks to Prince Leon and her, his touch was intense, yet soft and affectionate. It seems the man got angry, because the saint used the person for his benefit, and ran away. But bothering her all this time was for the same purpose. He got what he wanted. Now let her return to the empire, because the blonde is embarrassed to see him, so it would be good for her to disappear. Suddenly, Radbond appeared and brought clean towels and a change of clothes. They were worn but clean clothes. In the end, the beauty came out wearing the items he gave her and thanked Radbond for the clothes. The man bowed and apologized for not having suitable clothes for her, so he gave her his old ones. Upon learning that the saint was not angry at all, he turned around and said he would take her to the room. But instantly, the blonde took the commander's hand, telling him it was already late, and also suggested that they have a cup of tea first and then leave. Seeing Ratbun's embarrassed face, she realized it must be too late. Turning around, the girl whispered that in that case it would be better to go back, but the commander flatly refused. In fact, he went to prepare tea, and the blonde thought about what she would say when the man returned. The saint has already cleaned up the mess, but Ratbun doesn't actually ask her anything. But he always, even in silence, stays on the saint's side. Next to him, this atmosphere for some reason seems very comfortable. But the knight himself seemed to feel completely different, due to the fact that he had broken so many rules. At that moment, he could not stand this sight. Radbun did not understand why the saint was with that monster, because he thought that now she had changed. But she was really spending time with men again, but of course, she was definitely running away. If so, then maybe this prince forced her to spend time with him this way. Returning with a tray on which the tea was already cooling, the man noticed that the saint had fallen asleep. He sat down next to her, right on the floor, and held his head, sighing deeply. The blonde herself had a dream, or rather the real Evelina. She stated that she didn't even think such a calm person would decide to complete their tasks. The lady wanted to run after Ibelina, when suddenly she noticed that her hands were on another body. These were not her hands. It seemed that they were back in Ibelina's body, which made tears flow simply like a stream. The saint laughed and then said it was much better this way, calling the heroine obscene. He said that if she can exist and live with this body, then opening her legs shouldn't be a problem for any man. But the lady suddenly shouted that she had fulfilled the condition, as they had agreed, and now it was her body. To which the blonde just laughed, then congratulated the new heroine of her novel. The blonde approached Blue Eyes and took her by the hair, asking what she was going to do with this body. After all, since she has known a man's taste, most likely, according to Ibelina's assumptions, she will do it to the maximum. The real one would be very disappointed if the heroine was going to waste time in vain. But the girl did not understand why not, because she would try with all her might to act like a saint. Blue Eyes tried very hard. That's why everyone liked her. Unlike a real saint, but since the lady worked as a saint instead of her, she was interested in something. The saint grabbed Ibelina by the shoulders and asked her who Carl was, but the girl started screaming that she shouldn't have heard that name. It seems the heroine has found Ibelina's weak spot. She doesn't realize at all how the lady found out about Carl. She doesn't follow every moment, but if you use it well, you can completely break free from her. The blonde began to guess that this was her secret lover, because everyone said she watched him closely. Suddenly, Ibelina grabbed the depressed girl by the neck, threatening to kill her, but she had to let go. She said she wouldn't have to dirty her hands, because she had already received a letter, the one that burned immediately after reading it. The blue-eyed one said it would be more painful than death, because now she would have to give birth to the beast's offspring. After these words, the saint woke up in a cold sweat, and Ibelina's last words seemed to echo in her head. They said she wanted to see if the heroine could smile next time. The blonde heard strange sounds, but realized that the girl told her she would give birth to the beast's offspring. Looking around, the girl didn't even understand where she suddenly was, because she didn't fall asleep here. An unknown, but at the same time familiar smell came from the hallway. Suddenly, the saint realized that she was in Radbin's bed. This is troublesome, because dawn is already breaking and the girl has been out for a long time. So she began to look for the commander of the temple knights, thinking he was sleeping in the next room. Indeed, it was so, but the man didn't sleep, but waited for the holy morning. He hadn't slept yet, so the lady began to apologize because he looked frozen. The brunette said he wanted to accompany the blonde to her room. The girl returned safe and sound. The priests guarding the door were forbidden to enter, so there was no need to worry about that. The saint suddenly realized that her bodyguard was taking care of her. She thought that their relationship had finally improved. In fact, he was probably about to explode. But so many things had happened between them in a short time that it would be necessary to return the clothes as soon as possible. If other people saw the lady like this, it should never happen, so the blue-eyed one decided to hide the clothes well and return them secretly. It was the beginning of an ordinary day, and the girl was informed that a letter from Laris had arrived today. It seems there were no rumors about last night's events, which was very lucky. In fact, if you think about Ibelina in the past, it really doesn't matter. If Iris appears, the lady will not be able to avoid being banished. First of all, she must avoid being burned at the stake. In any case, she needs to prepare in advance so that the girl can live outside the temple after the saint. The power disappears, but she knew nothing about life outside the temple, and this will arouse suspicion. A secret passage behind the closet leads outside the temple. Somehow we must find a case and check everything in advance. In order not to delay the union, you will have to disguise yourself and have money. The girl feels bad, but it seems she will have to take some jewelry from the saint. Instantly, a maid burst into Ibelina, telling her that an urgent check was needed. But suddenly, the girl tripped and dropped all the documents, falling. The lady cracked her head and apologized for staining the documents with blood. The saint wished she could use divine power at that moment. But even so, the blonde's hands really began to heal, which was a great honor for the holy maid. The holy power appeared by the girl's will, and until Iris appeared, she could use this power. What a blessing! All this time, there were many dangerous moments, as the blue-eyed girl could not use her power. Quite some time had passed since no one had seen her in the temple. Now it will be easier to explore the limits of the great temple, she thought, when suddenly she was informed that Prince Leon urgently requested an audience. The blonde asked me to convey to him that she cannot accept his audience now. But from the hallway came his voice, saying that Leon would not go anywhere until he met the saint. The priests tried to explain to him that he could not enter without permission, and they also asked the girl, just in case, to leave this place, but the blue-eyed girl didn't understand if Prince Leon was such a character, or if he was angry about yesterday's events. Then, the blue-eyed girl wondered if the prince was going to use this as an excuse to attack the great temple. The saint announced that she would meet him so that he would calm down. They convinced her not to, but Ibelina understood that it was she who provoked Prince Leon, and she must take responsibility. When the doors opened, the lady saw Radvan, who was trying to stop the prince, and he also asked the girl to stay behind him. The blonde said that was absurd, because the saint came out alone, but her way was blocked. Only the commander of the knights exceeds his authority. But he replied that it is the duty of the commander of the knights to protect the saint in danger. But the blue-eyed man laughed, saying that indeed, her beauty was a bit dangerous. He called himself unscrupulous, ridiculing all the statutes of this great temple. And Ibelina suddenly realized that the man was deliberately trying to provoke Radbun. She understood that if the guy kept arguing like that, a war would start. This could not be allowed, so the blonde asked him to stop, interrupting the conversation between the two men. Blue Eyes ordered Commander Radbun to step back a little, because he was blocking the way. The girl invited Crown Prince Leon to enter, because they had something to talk about. After this, the lady ordered them to be left alone, indicating where the prince could go. The lady decided that she would explain everything to the man later, but now everything must be sorted out. Now, the priority is to stop the crown prince. The blonde sat opposite, crossed her arms over her chest, and then looked at the saint. He was originally targeting the temple, perhaps planning to use last night as an excuse. But the long-haired woman was not going to let it go like that. But she didn't know how to start a conversation when suddenly both began to talk about yesterday. In this case, since Leon interrupted Ibelina, she gave way and asked him to speak first. The blonde stated that yesterday was completely her fault and sincerely apologized, but she did not know that this one-night entertainment was not rare for the crown prince of the empire. Therefore, the blue-eyed one would be grateful if such a mistake did not happen again. But suddenly, the man said that the girl wrongly considered him a frivolous person, and it seems that the blonde, on the contrary, has put her even more on the hostile side. This was wrong from the start. No matter how urgent it was, she should not have touched this man, because this man is too dangerous. He will not ask what happened yesterday, but what the girl's goals were. Only that, like last night, if the saint needs someone again, then she can come to visit him. Taking Ibelina's hand, Leon kissed her, saying he wanted to know her more. The priests were discussing that Prince Leon was throwing himself at everyone, and none of them understood what they were going to do. And by the way, this was the first time everyone saw the commander so nervous. In reality, not only did he look nervous, but also angry. The man left the room and passed by Rathbun, saying he had to wait a long time. All the people were already shouting at Crown Prince Leon to stop being rude and be polite, but he just smiled and approached the knight. He also whispered that if Rathbun had any wit, then it would be better for him to understand everything and disappear. He clenched his fists, and the prince left the place, putting his hands in his pockets, leaving the man burning with anger. The lady was sitting at the table writing something, at the same time thinking about what Prince Leon had recently told her. She did not understand what this meant, assuming that he wanted to date her and start some kind of relationship. The blonde was too excited, so she almost hit her head on the table. She remembered his words that if she needed someone again, like last night, she should definitely come to visit him. Most likely, the man only wanted Ibelina's body. Upon leaving the room, the girl asked what was happening, to which she received the answer that High Priest Dalon seemed to be entering eternal sleep. He spent a long time in bed due to old age. Everyone knew that the saint kept avoiding this man, but now he really had little time left. In which case she asked if the priest was really worried that she might regret it. Ibelina would categorically refuse to meet this man. High priests are different from common priests. They can find out that she is not the real Ibelina. Now he really doesn't have much time left. But seeing how worried people were about the saint, she didn't think they had a hostile attitude towards her. She decided that the girl would find him and left. It was interesting what kind of person High Priest Dalon is. Not much can be learned from Ibelina's memories. If you think about it, the lady hasn't seen Radbun since that day. Most likely, he is deliberately avoiding her, but Ibelina wanted to explain to him everything. As the blonde passed by the worshipping knights, she addressed one of them. The blue-eyed girl asked if the priest knew where the commander of the knights, Radbun of the Holy Temple, was. Immediately, they started to be shocked, because Ivlina never cared where he was. Suddenly, Siddle asked what the saint was going to do when she saw her commander, because he didn't understand why the saint was personally looking for the captain of the knights. Of course, he apologized for his rudeness, but getting up, he repeated his question. Ivlina forgot that initially this is how people treated her, if it weren't for the duty to protect the saint. Most likely, Radbund would have treated her that way too. There were too many eyes on the lady. She couldn't let it go like that. For rudeness, as punishment, the girl ordered the knight to exclude him from the squadron for a period of 1 month. Since such behavior is not proper for a knight during this period, the punished person is prohibited from wearing a knight's uniform and sword. A friend of that same idiot abruptly forced him to bow, thanking the girl for her generosity. In any case, if things are not explained well, saying they were running late, the blonde told the priests they were in a hurry. The man started hitting and scolding Siddle for not only hating the saint, but daring to say it out loud. If so, then he could give up the title of knight and not waste time. Fortunately, the girl has become kinder lately. The boy just didn't understand why none of the knights tell. A captain who constantly seems unstable, and a saint who calls him incessantly. The man was sure that woman was seducing the commander. He was completely sure that this dirty prostitute would not let Radbin go. The saint arrived where she needed to be, and her presence was thanked. She was led to where the high priest is. The lady thanked the saint for the visit, but the high priest was barely conscious. He was quite old and could barely breathe. The girl was too unusual, because she had often smelled the scent of a person close to death. The saint said she would stay here for a while and asked everyone to leave this room. Since the priests neither heard nor understood what the lady meant, she shouted these words to them again to leave. They agreed and immediately left the place. She approached the dying body and slightly made the sign of the cross. The blonde did not know what kind of relationship she had with Ivlina. However, even now there are many memories of which she is not aware. The girl decided that she must discover all her secrets. Sacred power, the power that represents God, can heal wounds, poisons, infectious diseases, and it can be used to defend against attacks. But it is said that it cannot stop natural aging or death. And yet, the saint thought she could try it once. She didn't know if it would work, but she would like to. I would like to talk a little bit with this person. Seeing that there was no reaction, the blonde sighed without any hope. But suddenly, she heard the old woman begin to breathe. Gray immediately recognized the appearance of Saint Ibelina, smiling at her. The long-haired woman said it had been a long time since they had seen each other, when suddenly, the high priest immediately announced that she was not the real Saint Ivlina. In general, it was surprising that the old woman did not die and was still alive, but here she was surprised. The lady also did not understand why death never came, as memories from childhood suddenly appeared in her head. The saint did not understand why Ivlina treated the high priest this way. In her childhood memories, they seemed to get along well. She tried to understand what happened between them, but the grandmother only asked the girl to raise her for a while. She said that she regretted holding the position for a long time and not being able to fully perform her duties. Now it was true that she felt time was running out. Her hands were still trembling, despite the blonde's efforts with holy strength. In the end, she only gained a little time. The high priest addressed the saint and told her that the next high priest should be someone who could serve the saint well. The woman asked if perhaps Ivlina had already made a decision. The blue-eyed girl realized that this old woman was sincerely worried about Ivlina and the entire great temple. The lady suddenly replied that many people recommend Priest Carl, but the woman just burst into tears, announcing that the girl had finally made peace with Priest Carl. The long-haired one understood that she needed to know more, because she needed to know what happened to Priest Carl. Choking back tears, the woman said it had been a very good decision and that she was now calm. Surely the two will restore their former relationship, as she said, and she hoped they would return to those wonderful times. And peaceful. That day, the high priest, after all this conversation, died. They say he died less than an hour after Ivlina left. The old woman closed her eyes with my face, so everyone thanked the saint. It is important to mourn, but we must quickly make a decision about the next high priest. Everyone agreed, because the girl had to call everyone to choose a new one. As everyone knew, there were many high-ranking priests serving on different continents, but not all of them had returned yet. It is true, but it was impossible to just sit around. At least we should discuss the candidates. There were almost no sincere mourners. Most of the people sitting here were urged by Karis and Belain. Some people nominated Priest Erden, although he has a very bad reputation. But suddenly, someone nominated Priest Karl as a candidate. It seemed that no one even objected to such a statement, but the blonde was sure there would be someone who wouldn't like it. Therefore, the saint asked to send a letter to Priest Karl, who served in the outskirts, and come with the message to the great temple. The girl walked around the temple and wondered if there was a melting place. Tad remembered that he had to meet someone in the 4th room on the 3rd floor. Although he lived in the great temple, he still knew little about this place. He entered and elegantly apologized for being late. He assumed the man was busy with the high priest's funeral and thanked him very much for finding time to meet him. The Lion Prince clearly prepared for this meeting and even prepared tea. The man said that, in fact, he was very eager to meet this priest. And he also asked, wasn't this guy the one who recently helped the wounded knights of the Leon Empire? But the man said that caring for the sick is the responsibility of all priests. And yet, the fact that his knights, who were in great danger, could return healthy and safely to the Empire, all thanks to Priest Laddies. The girl had heard rumors that the Empire's crown prince was very arrogant, but he seemed very polite to her. The blonde asked not to reject his sincerity, even if it wasn't that significant. But suddenly, the man took out some kind of box, driving the lady crazy with curiosity. Upon opening it, the priest was truly disappointed to see an ordinary stone. It would seem that Leon was just mocking, but this stone was collected by the knights, who were healed by the priest's divine power. When they returned from Ashia as a gift for her, the gray-haired woman covered her face with her hand, realizing the meaning of this gift. As he said, this is not significant, but he will be very grateful if the girl accepts this gift. The special product of Ashia was the opal gemstone. There were no words, although even in such a size it had no great meaning. The blue-eyed prince bowed to the maiden and, smiling, addressed her by name. He said that if she became high priest, he would always remember her gratitude. The lady blushed completely at the mere thought that the entire empire, including the crown prince, supported her, and they trust her efforts as high priest. Sighing, the man threw his jacket over the chair. The girl said she trusts Lord Leon no matter what he does, but suddenly, the blonde again received some kind of letter that the advisor pointed out to him. He was certainly expecting this, because it was a letter from His Majesty the Emperor. Of course, the man expected this. He left for the great temple without even prior notice, and most likely, the father wrote to his heir to return immediately. The prince did not want to go home with all his might, and even thought he was going crazy. As expected, the emperor is aware of everything, and his father's positive service is as surprising as ever. The prince did not care about the others, but one of them would become the high priest. Using anything and anyone in Leon's power, he must keep Ibelina close to him. In a few minutes, they will accompany the saint to the cremation ceremony, but for now she can rest. Indeed, the girl was very tired. It was a high-level meeting, and she wanted to see everyone off like Karis. What was most frightening was realizing that Priest Karl would return soon. If he were named High Priest and left here, since Ibelina was afraid of him, maybe she wouldn't appear again. But what bothered her was the fear she felt when his name was mentioned. The lady tried to understand, or just remember, what happened between Ibelina and Karl. But suddenly, the blonde was struck by a severe pain, causing her hands to tremble again, and an unpleasant chill ran down her skin. Looking at her thigh, she saw bruises. This had definitely happened before. This strange mark only caused intense pain and was definitely not a natural wound. Previously, after a while, the pain subsided on its own, so the saint decided to endure it for a while. She didn't know what it was. If there was anyone else, she would immediately have healed it with her divine power. But the saint could not heal herself, and even with so much power, it was useless now. Having tried to heal herself with her charms, the lady noticed that the holy power began to come out of this mark. It felt as if, on the contrary, this mark was absorbing divine power inside it. But it didn't seem to heal. At the funeral, they spoke of the high priest as God's favorite daughter. Everyone wished that their benevolent woman would rest in peace. The last day of the funeral ritual for High Priest Daylon. Now she will be sent to God with prayers and fire. The girl mentally blessed this old woman and bid her farewell. In the beautiful flames that bring peace to the dead, the high priest disappeared. The saint could not hold back tears and the pain in her feet when bidding farewell to the old woman on her only path. She must not forget the last minutes of the false saint's life. That's right, this could not go on any longer. The girl had to re-establish her relationship with Rathbun. Although they hadn't seen each other this whole time, He must have come for the ritual. The blonde began to look at everyone around her, when suddenly she met a man who was also looking at her. When the saint looked at him, he immediately looked away. The situation has worsened greatly, which is what Ibelina thought. It is obvious that Radband hates the saint, and she did not know what to do. Well, first they should have returned her clothes, which the guard had lent to the saint a long time ago. And when the opportunity arises, the lady will tell him about that matter. If you go through the secret passage, the girl will be able to get there without meeting anyone. Since everyone here wears the same mourning clothes, even if someone sees them, they probably won't recognize them. The saint was very lucky, because the Radband residence was recently built with patronage. But instantly, after walking a little further, the lady realized that someone was there. As she passed by, the girl was carried in arms and no one recognized her, although she almost got into a lot of trouble. No one would have thought that the saint would wander around alone like this, especially since her face was covered. But what if the saint was caught sneaking into the house of the knight's captain, which she shouldn't have allowed? Finally, the saint arrived at the place, when suddenly she heard a voice ordering her to stop. The man asked who was trying to reach the captain's house and ordered her to say her name. In front of the saint was Siddle, who for some reason was near the knight's house. The girl tried to flee, but he immediately grabbed her, preventing her from leaving. Having removed the disguise, the man immediately realized that it was Saint Ibelina. He stated that he firmly expected this to happen. The boy began to say that simply seducing the captain was not enough, which is why Ibelina came here in the middle of the night. Noticing that she was even carrying a change of clothes, calling her stupid and depraved, Sadal grabbed the girl by the throat and started shouting something. He was sure that the lady thought she had fooled everyone, but she was wrong, because he had seen her rotten essence a long time ago. The hand tightened around another person's throat, cutting off their ability to breathe. The blue-eyed girl whispered for him to stop, because she started to choke. Instantly, divine power broke through, thus pushing the knight away from himself. This was the protective barrier working. The blonde was even afraid that this insolent man might die, and she didn't know what to do with herself out of desperation. She began to look for at least someone, but Radband himself appeared behind her. She went to his house, but he only asked her if the girl was okay. The long-haired girl looked at her teacup, afraid to utter a word. My hands were shaking, and the tea was starting to get cold. The blonde asked if that knight had died, but Radband replied that she shouldn't worry, because he had a slight concussion. And thanks to the saint's power, no one would die, because she knew it better than anyone. The man bowed deeply and apologized again. Brown said that as soon as Seidel wakes up, he will suffer the appropriate punishment, and Radband will expel him from the knight's squad, to which the Blue Blade sighed, feeling guilty about it. The temple knight, obliged to protect the saint, since he attacked her, will be punished. The girl said she hoped they would handle this as quietly as possible, so that no one else would find out. The girl continued to blame herself for everything, thinking this wouldn't have happened if she hadn't come to Radvan's house. The blonde suddenly looked at the commander and started apologizing for it. She justified, with tears on her cheeks, that she was just going to come and go quietly, just to give away things. Tears were already falling like hail, so the saint covered her face. The man approached her and asked why she was crying, beginning to wipe away her tears with his hand. Their gazes finally met, but Radbund literally knelt before the saint due to his height. Blue Eyes said she regretted ruining someone else's clothes. The brown-haired man asked her to stop apologizing, because the girl could simply throw those clothes away. But the lady said she would never do this, when suddenly, the knight saw the wounds on the girl's neck, shouting that she was injured because she hadn't used holy power sooner. He bowed to her because it was his fault as captain of the knights and asked to be punished. But the blonde in front said that everything was wrong. She supposed that the man must have been very angry with her all this time. Now, the lady realized that she could ask him sincerely. The blue-eyed girl looked at the knight and asked if he advised her to stay away from the crown prince, since she wouldn't listen if he was angry with her. Rathbun declared that he could not be angry with the saint and that he was not angry with her at all, but with Prince Leon. The girl asked him why he was angry with him, because he seemed to be doing nothing to her. But the brunette only replied that he represented a danger to the saint and the great temple. The lady really thought the man hated her the whole time, but he said he never got angry with her. Although that was a lie. Rathbun simply did not understand at what point his attitude towards the saint changed so dramatically. The captain promised that this would never happen. The long-haired woman thanked the man. Since he personally promises it, It is now impossible to refuse the words. The blonde dreamed that the end of this novel would be exactly like this. After all, even if Ivlina turns out to be a false saint, it's okay. But the guard was still thinking about his punishment. Because besides the security lapses during the prayer meeting, today's incident was also his fault. But instantly, the girl raised her hand and asked if the man was willing to accept punishment. She stated that then, due to incidents of failing to protect the saint, she would receive the appropriate punishment. Now, from now on, Radbun comes to the saint 3 times a week to teach her how to use a sword. The saint could not become a knight by herself. However, if she learns at least simple self-defense techniques, it would be great. Later, when the girl leaves the Great Temple, her self-defense skills will be very useful. And under the pretext of studying, the lady wanted to get a little closer to Radbun. The girl asked him to take care of her, to which the commander only agreed to such a punishment. If they get closer step by step like this, then he probably won't allow them to burn the saint at the stake. As in the original. Of course, later he would be on Iris's side, but still, the lady hoped that he would not completely turn his back on her, even when Ivlina is no longer a saint. Returning to her room, the blonde collapsed onto her bed. She still thought she had returned too late, because it was 2 or 3 in the morning. The lady was tired, but still, today she felt a little closer to Radvan. The girl covered herself with a blanket, starting to fall asleep, when suddenly she was awakened by a tall silhouette. The blonde was very surprised that the man could climb to the 5th floor through the window. The long-haired man looked at the saint, calling her by name. This was Aslan, the king of mages, and also the 3rd male protagonist. Upon waking up, the saint asked what he was doing here. The redhead asked if the saint had received the letter he sent her. The blue-eyed girl began to remember the letter that immediately disappeared after reading it. It was written there that the deal was now closed and that he would soon be with her. The girl suddenly jumped up and started asking what the deal was and what it meant, but the man just grabbed her by the legs, telling her that the deal was that the saint would become his woman. The man leaned in front of her and smiled at any sound. The blue-eyed girl could not believe what she was seeing. What this man was saying was simply madness. This man was not entirely human. He smelled of danger, and the girl realized that she needed to run now. The blonde tried to hit the psychopath and also run away, but the redhead simply grabbed her legs again, trying to hold her down. The man declared that the saint was his female, which he barely managed. Red eyes, he said there was no reason to wait anymore, and from now on, he would fill the girl from within one. And again. And so, until the lady becomes pregnant with his child, when suddenly, the saint remembered Ivlina's words that she would have to give birth to the beast's child. The rapist said that the blonde could not refuse, because she had already made a promise. Taking his victim by the chin and turning her towards him, the man reminded her that Ivlina was preparing her body to be able to accept him. She was supposed to drink tea, which was a medicine that helps resist his magical powers. But the lady already smelled of preparation. The deal was completed because Ivlina had previously accepted it. Now, even if the blue-eyed girl makes a face like she knows nothing, it won't work. He apologized because he could no longer wait. After all, his patience is running out completely. The saint again remembered Ivlina's words that this girl herself wanted this body. And now she feels severe pain from the violence, to which she did not consent. If so, the saint must accept everything, both life with this body and the deal made with this body. The crying woman again heard Ivlina's voice, which she so much wanted to banish. The lady felt incredible pain under the weight of another person. It was impossible to leave it like that, because if it continues then everything is over. The rapist only stated that she exceeded his expectations. And indeed, she will give him a child and she will be his woman. The man was worried that it might not work right away, and decided to do it again. The blonde suddenly screamed at him to stop, but he only said that nothing had gone right yet. And when the child appears, you can feel it. Therefore, they cannot stop. The agreement stated that he would do it as many times as necessary. Instantly, the saint lost consciousness, to which the man snorted that she did not need to be conscious. The redhead lay down next to her and tried to bring the lady back to consciousness. Honestly, he did not understand why the saint was having such a hard time, although perhaps Ivlina drank little tea. He was clearly annoyed because people were too weak. By the way, the first condition of the deal was to get rid of the marks on her thigh. This is a very old curse that devours the powers of its owner. In a great temple where sacred powers are concentrated, it is very strange to see something like this on the body of the saint herself. but he can get rid of those things with a single move. The man was very surprised that the saint could not even tolerate this. This is a problem, because now it is taking away her sacred power. But soon the girl's life will become a target. In the end, everything will end with the death of the mark's owner. A very terrible curse. But the man promised that he would somehow fix this, because now she is his female. The captain was informed that Seidel was missing and did not seem to be there last night, saying that they would find him and bring him. This guy was on parole, so Ratbun rejected him. He said that Seidel had lost his knight title and that they would not see him again. The knights knew that one day he would cause big trouble, but what did he do to lose his status? The captain spoke calmly, but his soul must have been hard, and they create a lot of trouble with gossip. The man suddenly asked what was wrong with his commander, as it seemed strange to him that he was smiling for the first time. He repeated in his head Ibelina's words, that they should meet in her room during the day. But time passed too slowly. Deciding that the knight could, in principle, leave early, he headed to the temple. While the man was still on his way, he thought about what to teach the saint first. Considering that she does not have basic physical strength, he should have started with self-defense techniques. But the girl can still prevent danger with her sacred power. Rathbun wondered why he asked her this. Maybe there is another reason why she didn't tell him, but no. It was necessary to get rid of those thoughts, because a man can only faithfully follow his orders. But suddenly, upon leaving, he notices Crown Prince Leon, not understanding why this monster is here again. The man remembered the situation when he saved the saint, thinking that Leon was lurking around the saint again. The blonde announced that he had come to see the saint anyway. The future emperor asked what Radbond was doing here then, saying that when a person asks, one must answer. But suddenly, both were reminded that they were in front of the saint's residence, so they were asked to remain silent. The commander apologized, although there was no need to talk to this man. The man only asked to convey to the girl his words, that he had come to fulfill his promise. But the men were informed that neither of them could have an audience with the saint. She is busy, so they will have to wait a little. Suddenly, they realized that there was someone in the blonde's room. The captain felt the evil and powerful energy of the demonic beast, so he could not wait long. And he rushed to save the girl. He began knocking on doors and shouting if everything was all right with the blonde. Finally, the saint regained consciousness, which made the beast very happy. The lady looked at her rapist and told him that she really didn't remember anything. The demon did not understand what he should do, because the girl clearly did not understand what kind of contract she had made. The man began to use space magic, saying that things were wrong, when after all she said she remembered nothing. It was obviously high-level magic, and he could control that power with great ease. He handed the lady the letter she had been sending him all this time. It was written there that giving birth to his child would be extremely dangerous for her, so she had to fulfill any of his requests. This was true, because the piece of paper was exactly Ibelina's handwriting. Judging by the neatness of her handwriting and her style, she was definitely in her right mind. The girl asked what the deal was, but the demon also had the mark of the deal they had made. Neither sacred power nor magical power felt an energy as heavy as this one. In the girl's hands was a real artifact. That is, an object from another world. Later Iris would also acquire several similar artifacts. The saint said she could not understand what was written there, to which the demon agreed to translate it for her. Besides the signature, all other letters automatically convert to the language of the world in which this stone tablet was created. And it was also written that Saint Ibelina swears. She promises to become Aslan's woman and give birth to an heir. The blonde decided to check Aslan's loyalty by asking him if he was lying, taking advantage of her inability to read. When the lady asked this, she realized that she really didn't remember anything they talked about. She asked if there were other conditions, but according to the deal, after becoming his woman, the man could not lie to her. Then, the blue-eyed girl rechecked what she was asking for in return, this contract. But the girl only wanted 3 things from him, and he could do more. Among which, the first, he did not have time to announce, because the saint was informed that Captain Radbun said he had arrived at the business he had promised her. Hearing someone else's voice, the girl pushed the beast away from her and shouted to the boys to wait a moment, because she was busy. But her male clearly did not like this attitude towards himself, which even angered him. The girl immediately realized that she needed to get rid of him first. She tried to smile sweetly and ask the man to get out of bed, but he refused. There was no time to lose, so the lady shouted at the demon to get back here. But he looked at her with displeasure and clearly replied that he did not want to and would not do this. He did not understand why he had to do this, because he was now next to his female. The saint got scared and asked the man to calm down, trying to push him away from her again. If she were an ordinary person, the girl would pretend to have returned to her old habits. However, she could not allow herself to be caught with this man. Taking cunning into her fist, the girl hugged Aslan tightly, trying to explain to him that she was a saint. She does not want to appear inappropriately in front of people in the great temple. The blonde even called him her man so that he would understand her situation and let her go. After biting her on the neck, he agreed and then said he would be back soon. Finally, Sir Radbun burst into the room, but apparently saw no one near the saint. The girl clumsily lied, saying she had gone to bed late. Therefore, it took her a little longer than usual to wake up. Ibelina understood that this was not a plausible excuse and that it could be the end for her. The crown prince apologized for the bad manners that arose while the lady was resting. But Leon heard that the girl had some kind of promise with Captain Radbond and asked her if that was true. Therefore, he thought it would be better, at least, for the prince to leave. The man must have been disappointed with the blue-eyed girl. She could have just left, but he started saying useless words. But in return, the blonde asked him to promise her that next time, when it suited her, they could talk again. Surprised that this man was still treating Ibelina well, she smiled. The heir said that, in any case, he would wait for news from the saint and then left the temple. Radbin suddenly asked if everything was all right with the girl's body. After making sure everything was normal, the man decided to start the first lesson. He said that, when the blonde is ready, she should let him into the hall and they will start there. It is true, the captain never asks anything, which made the saint happy. Self-defense lessons, the blonde asked for so she could get closer to Radbin. Therefore, it was necessary to try to win his sympathy. And then, maybe, they will get closer, so that Radbund will say that this cannot be so that he cannot immediately recognize her as a brilliant swordsman. The man said he had prepared a wooden sword for training, after which all the girls' dreams shattered. He explained this by saying that it was not wise to start training with a real sword. The lady felt embarrassed for having imagined all sorts of things and asked to start the lesson quickly. So the knight took out his real sword and offered to try to take it once. But alas, the saint could not hold it because the real sword is too heavy. The man immediately apologized because he had no idea it would be so difficult for the girl. The blonde only admired this because it was really incredibly heavy. Although only with that weight can one resist monsters. Of course, you can lighten the weight if you make a sword out of another mineral or monster bone. But in this case, power is lost. But it is possible to attack faster. But of course, the most important thing is to find a suitable sword for yourself. This was the first time the saint saw Ratbun talk for so long, and for some reason, she herself got agitated. Blue Eyes realized that not all swords are the same, and everyone chooses and adapts to the sword that suits him best, which is why each one is unique. That's why knights value their sword as much as their lives. Instantly, the lady began to apologize for almost dropping such a valuable sword. It was a great relief that the man caught it safely. Suddenly, the commander realized that he had just given his sword to someone else. She seemed to be disappointed with the wooden sword, and without realizing it, Rathbun gave her his valuable sword. The commander asked to grip tighter and not straighten the elbow too much, and it is imperative to direct the force even to the little finger. It's impossible, such a basic technique, but it was very difficult for the girl. The brown-haired man asked if he could personally put the lady in the correct position. Apologizing, the man's hands fell on the saint's waist, causing her body to bend as needed. She needed to concentrate on the lesson, so the blonde listened carefully and did as they said. Suddenly, the girl noticed a wound on the knight's hand, realizing it hadn't received proper treatment, to which he said it was a common scratch and not worth wasting the priest's holy power on it. Finally, the lady was now worthy of his first praise. She stated that all this was thanks to the commander of the knights of the great temple, Raspun. As thanks for his teaching, the girl asked to lend a hand to her teacher, starting to heal him with divine power. It was more reliable when there was a good teacher. She wanted to work hard and improve her skills. But the man explained that even if the saint mastered the sword, it would take a long time to be able to inflict a significant blow on the enemy. However, she wields the monstrous dagger Kailas. The only dagger on the continent made from the bone of the monster Kailas is a precious sword that retained the monster's special ability to return inflicted damage to the enemy by the owner of the dagger. This weapon was passed down to the saint from generation to generation. There is no need to study and master a sword with difficulty. For self-defense, a dagger would be much more suitable. Ratbun believed that if you learn the correct way to aim, you will soon be able to use it. But now, unlike other jewels kept in the central temple, this dagger was kept by the saint herself. However, Ibelina gave it to someone in case something happened. She literally gave away the weapon for spending the night with her. The lady could not understand how she could give away the temple's treasure like that. She decided not to say anything about this. The side streets of the city surrounding the temple, its dark side, where drugs are sold, and stolen goods. The blonde had no choice but to check if her dagger was there. She again had to leave through the secret passage. But first, it would be worth preparing to leave so that she could do everything calmly. It was necessary to devise a good plan, because such things require careful preparation. It was necessary to ensure that there would be no problems after the saint left the room. And all the paperwork had to be taken care of. She was informed that the list of candidates for the position of high priest had already arrived today. Either Karis did not arrive, or it was already too late. The saint asked where priest Karis was, and to prepare everything for the pre-election meeting. Blue Eyes suddenly thought that Prince Leon might show up in her absence. She also asked to prepare a letter for Prince Leon, but was told that the prince was not here. The priest heard that he left in a hurry and probably returned to the empire. But he could change his mind, and this should no longer worry the saint. He said it as if he were going to wait an eternity. Tomorrow the girl plans to pray alone in her room and tell the priests about it. After the lady had sorted out all the matters, she was ready to leave. By breaking open a secret passage with the help of magic, Ibelina found herself on that very street. There were many people, and fortunately no one paid attention to the saint. If she crosses the gate, she will find herself outside the temple. Suddenly, Ibelina wondered if she needed to return. After all, if the girl leaves forever, she will no longer have to worry about being burned at the stake. Instantly, someone in the crowd shouted and ordered the lady to stop. The temple knights were walking down the street, and also, among them, Rathbun. The saint quickly began looking for an excuse not to ruin her relationship with the man. But it turned out that the knight was not chasing a saint at all, but some guy who had forbidden things in his hands. In the end, it turned out that this man was carrying a Bible stolen from the temple. Drathbone was very angry because someone dared to steal something so sacred from the temple. It seemed the captain noticed the saint's silhouette, but tried not to pay attention to her. He calmed down thinking that the blonde definitely couldn't be here. This must be a place people frequent, but no one knows about it. For a boy, everything was even excellent, which made passers-by jealous. This lasts a long time. His compliments are so obvious that she will soon get tired of them. Suddenly, the girl remembered that passerby, because they were talking about him having a wallet full of money. Although in the end, they simply threw it away, leaving him with some kind of cheap dagger. When his friend started thinking about it again, he found it very amusing to think about. The blonde followed the man, wondering what she should do or say, although he might recognize her. Following him, the lady suddenly found herself on that very legendary street. The boy tried to sell the dagger, but everyone chased him away because they thought it was cheap. Suddenly, seeing a street vendor having her weapon, the girl was happy. The man asked what such a young lady was doing here and why she had come here. She calmly explained that she had come for that dagger and also asked to announce its cost. The merchant was willing to give such a beautiful lady half a gold coin. But suddenly, the saint heard someone's voice telling her from behind that this was an obvious scam for money. Turning around, the lady saw Crown Prince Leon himself, who apparently recognized the saint. If they had haggled more, they would have bought that dagger for 3 coins. The girl thanked the prince, because thanks to him she bought what she wanted, much cheaper. Suddenly, the friendly conversation turned into an interrogation, and Leon asked what the blonde was doing here. He was more worried about the fact that this was a very dangerous place, and what the commander of the knights thought when he sent the saint alone. The blue-eyed girl understood that if Rathbun found out about this, then there would be no trouble. So she said that in any case, thank you to the man for his help today. Wanting to get away from the conversation as quickly as possible, the lady flees when suddenly a horse and a rider begin to rush towards her. The blonde did not step aside and covered the girl with his body. Noticing a drop of blood on the blue-eyed woman's cheek, the man apologized for not being able to protect her from everything. He said that next time, he would not make such a mistake. The blonde asked not to let the ground touch the girl, because he would definitely protect her. suddenly realizing that this man must really like the saint. He placed his hand on her neck. The girl immediately noticed that the prince's robe was all dirty and wrinkled. It was because of her, so the saint hurried to apologize. Having grabbed new clothes, the man asked if they suited her, but on that side there were clothing stores. Although the prince really knew the street well, Leon smiled and asked to simply call him by his first name. The blonde feared that this was not entirely polite, but the risk was that the prince could be discovered in such a place. When a saint appears, that is, the custom is that those who have the same name as the saint change them. Therefore, the lady asked to call her Lena. The lady really wanted the man not to address Saint Evelina, but a real girl. The blonde asked if by chance the girl wanted to see the city. He thought he could make an excellent guide. The crown prince said that the specially created roof serves to collect rainwater. Houses that do not have running water are mainly built this way. There were hotels next door to highlight them. They were decorated in the same way. This is a feature of the city where there are many tourists. The blonde asked if the saint was hungry, because in this city there were some quite good snacks worth trying. All the snacks looked quite appetizing. The man ate too much food, and the saint hesitated whether she could eat it all. After a while, Evelina had eaten enough, but still had some kebab left. The lady regretted leaving the food, when suddenly, the crown prince began to eat directly from the girl's hands. Strolling through the city, the blonde began to admire the beautiful paintings. She saw many landscapes for the first time, surprised that these places really existed. Leon began to tell that there is a place, the plateau of the Wolf King, of course. Real wolves do not live there, but when the wind blows, it seems like wolves are howling. Hence the name. There was also the Hefferman Forest, an incredible place where it doesn't matter which way you enter. You come out in the same place. The blonde remembered a place, whose location she saw on the internet in her previous body. Then, addressing the saint as Lena, the man suggested that someday they go there together. He said that the image is a snowy land located in the far north. It is very cold there. As long as Lena remains a saint of the great temple, all these are just dreams. But in reality, they are impossible. Blue-eyed, she suddenly asked if Lena would return to this place. The lady thought what would happen if she honestly told Leon, because he could help her escape. However, there was a place she needed to return to and finish. The prince thought that she probably had a secret route. She would want to keep it secret, so the man would go a little later. A few days ago, monsters appeared in a village on the other side of the continent. Fortunately, the knights nearby quickly rushed and destroyed them. But many people were poisoned by the deadly venom of the monsters. Their bodies burned inside. People begged for help, or at least to save their children. Not even a few high-ranking priests will be able to neutralize this hell. However, the saint directed all her forces to help, using her divine power. Everyone was simply happy that Saint Evelina finally appeared to save them. It is said that people were delighted when the little saint appeared, but the woman was confused, and she ran away. Leon claimed that there could not be two saints at the same time. This is proof that the saint of the great temple is fake. Everyone assumed that all this time they were not trying to cast a shadow on the saint of the great temple. And now is the opportune time, because they must take possession of that true saint. It was imperative to find that woman and find out if there was someone behind her. The saint looked especially radiant today. It seems she received God's favor through yesterday's prayer. The blonde thought that since she found the dagger she could sleep well, and she should try again starting today. Finally, Captain Radbun went to see the girl. The man apologized because it was sudden, but he came to ask permission to leave. The lady, without even hearing the reason, already gave permission. Upon learning that the absence would be for some matter, the girl was willing to listen. The thing is, according to the accounts of the knights who accompanied Father Karl, his health suddenly deteriorated on the way to the temple. They said that at that moment, it would be difficult for him to get up. The chestnut-haired man asked Ear with the priests to meet him to provide treatment, to which the blonde asked to bring him back safe and sound. For the first time, Radbun was able to get permission to leave the great temple so easily. Passing by the servants, the man saw a robe that seemed familiar to him. That seems to be what the saint was wearing in the city. It was laundry, so the servants did not understand what was happening. The knight wondered why, without saying a word to the knights, he left the great temple alone. Deciding that he would ask the lady personally, the man noticed Leon, who was here again for some reason. Suddenly, he entered the saint's room, calling her Lena, but in turn, the girl said that she had arrived in time. Instantly, the knights asked the commander if he was well, because he looked tired. The crown prince was absent at that time. He was outside the temple with the saint. The man said they did a great job. Accompanied by Father Karl, 3 high-ranking priests are treating him, and soon he will be able to move. Suddenly, the dark-haired man was told that at the moment, Father Karl lost consciousness. Something strange happened. The priest's condition was as if he had been enveloped in a monster's magic. When Rathbun walked up to Karl, he simply smiled and greeted him. The 2 men had not seen each other for a long time. He asked how the night was, to which he replied that of course that was fine. Father Karl, who was always kind and attentive to everyone respected him. And they kept following. Everyone except one single person. But the priest's well-being was more important, because the man heard that it was impossible to know the reason why he lost consciousness. But the man knew nothing, because his body was not very healthy to begin with. But this was the first time something like this had happened to him. But now everything is fine, thanks to the effort of Commander Radbun and the priests. Karl said that if the saint had come herself, she would not have caused trouble to so many people. No one can ask the saint for healing. Besides, she cannot help but know that the saint hates him. But despite this, the priest asked if everything was all right with Saint Ibelina. She had always been fine, but Karl must have been tired after the treatment. So the man decided to go and let him rest. But the blonde said he could stay a little longer. But the chestnut-haired man refused, saying they would talk more when they arrived at the great temple. The commander left the temple saying that he would return first. All the fish in the Morton River change the color of their scales to gold once a year. On those days no one fishes. Everyone prays. Prince Leon had already been there. It was dazzlingly beautiful. The girl asked what happens to that place and pointed to it on the map. But if you go there and are careless, you can hurt yourself. It was an empire, or rather, the imperial palace was also quite a fun place. Since this place has existed for several hundred years, it has always been finished. So you can see the characteristics of each generation there. And also the living architecture of the continent in chronological order, you could say. And the central market of the empire has all the things from the continent. It is so large and confusing that it is impossible to cover it all in one day. The blonde said it would be a disaster if a person like her, who doesn't know how to move, went there. But the crown prince, Lord Leon, said there is no reason to worry, because Lena is his personal guide. However, if Iris appears, it will end up being her whom Leon loves. By the way, the man said that if another high-ranking priest comes, a meeting will be held to select a high priest. He suddenly changed the subject, as the girl understood, saying that Commander Radbun had gone after this man. Before the girl had time to finish speaking, an intense pain shot through her body. She immediately apologized for suddenly feeling unwell. The lady looked away and politely asked him to leave so she could face it alone. When Leon's hand touched the saint, her body heated up and her temperature rose. Despite such intense pain, this feeling was suddenly replaced by a very pleasant sensation. The blonde realized that she needed to return to the room before someone arrived. Now, under no circumstances, could she meet anyone. The girl tried to regain consciousness, but suddenly a sound was heard from the room. Because they had an urgent matter for which they needed to enter. The man said that he met with Father Karl and had just returned, but he needs to discuss something, so Ratbond is forced to enter for a short time. But suddenly, the lady shouted that he could not enter to see her. The chestnut-haired man thought the saint might be sick, but for a girl, starting from below, her body gradually begins to burn. Something begged Radbund to enter, but Lena herself did not want this more than anything else. The knight entered the room, and the girl smelled his body odor, said she would like to ask him to check something. The saint asked to do this next time, saying that it wouldn't last long and she should leave before it was too late. Realizing that the blue-eyed girl could not bear it anymore, he looked away. The lady instantly approached her knight and kissed him deeply. She was completely sure that today Radbond could satisfy her. The blonde started licking someone else's lips, begging the chestnut-haired man to open his mouth for a kiss. He wanted to explain to the girl that this should not be done, when suddenly he was thrown onto the bed, and was told that the saint wanted his body. Ivlina wanted to hug Ratbun, kiss him, and take advantage of him. The lady did not understand why the man was stopping him. What should she do to make him hug her? The saint desperately wanted to know what to do to seduce this honest knight. And sitting on top of him, the lady asked him if he really hated her. It seems all of this is the work of the real Ivlina. Having regained consciousness, the blonde was surprised by what she was doing, and then she hurried to flee. Burying herself in the bed, the lady shouted that Radven should not be in the man's place. She didn't know what to do or how to handle this situation. Suddenly, a red-haired man appeared through the window and called the lady his wife. Aslan understood that apparently the girl was waiting for him. Everything was fine, because if the man was here, then she could definitely quench this thirst. But suddenly, the male declared that the smell of another male came from his female. Aslan roughly grabbed the lady by the neck and brought his face close to hers. The demon asked if the other male had touched her anywhere else. The beast began to bite parts of the saint's body to find a place where other people could touch. But surprisingly, the lady only asked to do it again. After the blonde lost consciousness again, the man concluded that she was very weak. He wanted to give her the ring while she was awake, but because they were doing terrible things one moment, and again, there was no time or memory for this. He wondered if the holy gem would like it. If the lady saw it, she would definitely smile cheerfully. It was necessary to fix the mark on Ibelina's thigh as soon as possible. Touching this scar, the man realized that it was directly related to an intense thirst. He realized that his wife did not want to give herself to him of her own free will. Aslan will definitely find the person who used this vile magic and kill him. By tearing him apart, it was because of this that the smell of the other male came. These insignificant human males are not important anyway. After all, in the end, his seed is much stronger. However, the redhead wanted to have exclusive possession of this human woman. The demon realized that the priests weren't going that way because it was a secret passage. This is an unusual person. He is so strong that he can resist monsters. The commander of the temple knights was a strong knight. The redhead whispered that he was the one who left the scent of another man. Radbun went through all the strange situations with the saint. Reluctant to forget her, it seemed that the man felt the same way as Ibelina, and no matter how much he recited the prayer, it didn't weaken. The chestnut-haired man tried to tell himself that under no circumstances should he have such feelings for the saint. Having decided that the knight must meet his beloved, he got out of bed and headed to his room. The mission of the knight commander and the glory he had achieved, everything Rathbun had pursued until now seemed vague. One thing was clear: she, Ibelina, and the commander of the knights wanted to brazenly call her by name. The next morning, the chestnut-haired man said he wanted to see the saint, but they explained to him that the meeting would be difficult now, because the saint had completely closed the doors. Perhaps the girl wanted to spend time alone, as before, or rather, with one of her fans. The knight thought it was better to return, and that he could not approach her secretly. He began to fight the desire to see the blonde when he suddenly felt someone's mana. This power seemed to come from Saint Ibelina's room. Rathbun tried to enter, but the magic blocked his powers and his entry. He ran to the beast and asked how he had entered the great temple, to which he smiled, because it wasn't bad at all for a temple dog. The man immediately understood that the one in front of him was a knight who dared to desire his lover's lips. The demon lifted the girl and declared that he could keep her. Aslan said his name, and he should at least know the name of the one who will kill him. Such a big battle was prevented by the lady's tears through sleep. Finally, the priests began to congratulate their neighbor, Father Carl. Green Eyes is also very happy to return to the great temple. In her dream, the lady saw that place again. The blonde did not understand why she was here again, because Ibelina was not there. Lena was fully aware that she had lost her mind because of that very mark on her thigh. The lady remembered the demon's words that, depending on her condition, this mark would be removed. But this was not created in one day. It would have been impossible without her consent. The blonde urgently needed to understand what exactly happened, or rather, to recover forgotten memories. If only the girl could know about them, even for a moment. Finally, memories appeared that Carl told her when she was a child that, having understood one thing, she understood everything else. The little girl finally realized that these were the distant memories of Ibelina. The little saint did everything right. She was very insightful, as expected from someone who receives the greatest love from God. For the first time, the blue-eyed one saw these memories that the real Ibelina hid. In the memories that love her, it was interesting because she hid them, but other memories were needed. She also remembered their first prayer meeting. Carl always supported the girl, saying that she doesn't have to send blessings to everyone. If it's difficult, then she can stop whenever she wants. As the priest said, Ibelina is the one who receives God's love. Blue Eyes said she should share her powers with those people who need her help, so as not to disappoint those people who need her help. Lena tried to show herself the memories that her body hid from everyone. It turned out that Carl was to blame for that mark, because the girl cried saying she was giving away her divine power by following his teachings. Suddenly, the real Evelina appeared in this space and began to ask the girl how she got here and why. Her sacred power was decreasing again, and the lady prevented the blonde from fully seeing her memory. It seems that something must change if the new Lena finds out what happened, because only then will there be a reason why she hides everything. Blue Eyes asked if Evelina called Aslan because she wanted to get rid of the mark. The girl said she would do whatever she wanted and get rid of the mark. Evelina just laughed and asked how much longer this girl would be insolent. She said it wasn't worth bringing Lena and that she had to endure until the end. Because of this, the blonde threw the lady into another reality, ordering her to return. There is still one card left to play. Finally, the saint regained consciousness, which was greatly anticipated by the two men standing nearby. The blonde wanted to lose consciousness again, but Radbin only asked for one order, and he would slit this guy's throat. But the demon replied that the temple dog lacks training because he drools shamelessly and dares to covet his master. The beast said it was better to tell the truth. The fact that the girl hugged him was not at her request, but an error due to magic. Suddenly, to get rid of personal questions, he lowered the hem of the lady's dress and showed him the hickeys he left on her, thus angering the man. The beast showed a mark on the girl's thigh, saying that this mark would soon eat her lover. And of course, she will soon lose her divine power, and moreover, she will control her body at will. This was the reason for the incident that occurred between them. Aslan explained to Radbond that his lover called him to get rid of this curse. Red was not going to tell the terms of their contract, so the lady had nothing to worry about. The knight asked the saint if this demon's words were true. But no matter how you look at it, this problem is difficult to solve within the great temple. So the girl asked Aslan for help. The man seemed disappointed that their kiss was a mistake. Evelina had a weak will yesterday. She couldn't say for sure if it was due to magic. However, she wanted to say something, but Aslan didn't let her, starting to be jealous. The knight commander did not realize that something was wrong with his lover, so he is incompetent. But is there any need to raise a puppy that couldn't recognize how the enemy got in? The brunette apologized to the saint because he was too inept. It was clear that the redhead was not a person at all. He exudes mana that can harm a person. Even if necessary, maximum distance must be maintained from him. Instantly, the Lion Crown Prince called the room, and the girl, in turn, allowed him to enter. The blonde entered the room saying he had brought a book with illustrations. The saint suddenly shouted that if those two fought, she would use the help of the Lion Crown Prince. Today a new high priest will finally be chosen. A great disaster almost happened yesterday, but the lady trusted the prince. For some time, the demon will be close to the temple, so you can call him at any time if necessary. The blue-eyed girl understood that Rathbun did not have an offended expression on his face. But in reality, the three of them liked her, even though she was the main character. Iris, if someone finds out that she is a false saint, the three of them will lose interest in her. For the crown prince, since the girl is fake, she will become useless. Aslan will not need a body that cannot bear a child, and Rathbun can only be faithful to a true saint. Therefore, they will manage without empty hopes, and the girl will have to fend for herself. The time has finally come when Evelina can meet Carl, but at the meeting the lady only saw familiar faces. Apparently, the man had not yet arrived. Instantly, one of the priests said that he had something to tell. More precisely, he would like to voluntarily withdraw his candidacy. It turned out that many priests withdrew their candidacy. The saint asked what happened and why suddenly everyone wanted to do this. Of course, it is very honorable to be a candidate for high priest, but Priest Carl returned, and when we met him, we immediately realized that he was the only one worthy of being high priest. When the long-awaited Carl arrived, a tremor ran through the girl's body, and she herself wanted to run away. But if she suddenly leaves, everyone will think it strange. Suddenly, Radbond approached the lady and asked if she was okay. Prince Lion told Lena that he would be the first person she would turn to for help. He knew that not only the knight captain and Prince Lion, but also that demon were watching the girl. So you have nothing to worry about, because there are many people close to the saint. The lady tried to realize that she was not alone now. This fear and trembling, Evelina's emotions, not hers. And the girl no longer needed to worry, so she confidently approached the priest. She whispered that they hadn't seen each other in a long time. An hour ago, the commander of the temple knights Radbin and Crown Prince Leon met. The blonde smiled and said that the meeting to choose the high priest would begin soon. And he saw the brunette heading towards the saint. Even if they combine forces, how disappointed the saint felt when she learned that he did not want this. The future emperor asked to be told about Priest Karl, what he did before arriving at the Great Temple. But Radbun said that this question was inappropriate, because Priest Karl had been in the Great Temple since his birth. He met him because they say he is a strong candidate for the position of high priest. It was an honor for the priest to receive such a great man. He carefully considered the tone, the way of speaking, and the proper attitude towards strangers. Leon realized that this man was not like the one who had lived his whole life in the Great Temple. But the candidate wondered why the crown prince remained in the Great Temple. After all, maybe he has some personal business here. The blonde was surprised that Karl did not know about this, but with pride in his eyes. He said he was here to have the saint in his hands. The priest announced that it was time to start a meeting about choosing the high priest, and he asked the nominated candidates to come forward one by one. The blonde thought there was nothing to worry about. Not everyone withdrew their candidacy. 3 people stood up for the final count, and Priest Karl stood up. A disturbing atmosphere appeared. It seemed as if Charles had already been confirmed for the position of high priest. The main candidate himself thought he could return everything soon. The saint planned to use him to oppress Ibelina, but now she is not sure if it was the right decision. Radbund asked if his lordship wanted Priest Charles to take the position of high priest, because if that is the case, then she can order him to stop it. After the applause ceases, Charles will become a true high priest. Blue eyes, she didn't know how the knight knew this, but she wanted to say that she would stop Karl, even if she didn't know exactly how. But the brown-haired man will definitely be able to do something, because he is a man who keeps his word. Suddenly, the lady asked the man not to allow Carlos to become high priest. He only drew his sword and apologized for his rudeness in such a meeting, but would like to ask permission for a more important matter. Kneeling before the saint, the knight asked for immediate dismissal, and this was because he had not fulfilled his duties. Islan really disliked this power, although it is not visible to the human eye. Like when he came to this world through a crack, and the longer he stayed here, the more power he lost. The beast needed more power, and if there was a creature with similar power and they could have a child, then he could return. It was necessary to find a way to give birth to him, because there is no woman in this world who can handle his seed, because it represents a huge cloud of power. The saints of one world are those who close the cracks through which man needs to return. They are his enemies, and in such a situation, he could not believe that the girl turned to him. Red was willing to grant any wish if the saint gave birth to a son for him. The blonde sat down and realized that it was urgent to stop this. Everyone said it was absurd for the party itself to ask for dismissal. Maybe he was tired of this hectic Templar life, but could the dismissal be something that was quickly decided? The priest said they understand that the task of the knights is difficult, but all this can be resolved without resorting to such extremes. But the man said that not long ago the undead invaded the temple, and unfortunately he did not notice and could not stop it. The saint suddenly realized that they were talking about Aslan, but the brunette was sure that he was not worthy to assume the sacred duty. No one understood what kind of undead they were talking about, when suddenly the temple was pierced by a powerful magic. A large amount of magic came from the sky, which Aslan emitted from himself. He was definitely a demon, and the girl was trying to understand what he was doing with such powerful magic. The whole council realized that this magic emanated from the creature Captain Radbun was talking about, and everyone was right as before, and since he could not stop it, it would be right to dismiss the knight. But to do this, they have to follow established procedures. But in this case, it will take a long time. Then choose a high priest, because this is the most important topic now. The priest did not understand. With such an amount of power, it should have been just a huge demonic beast. But how could such a big thing simply be overlooked? The magic became stronger, so all people were ordered to take shelter. Drathbun approached the saint and asked her to leave him, but the girl did not understand. The knight couldn't just take everything and throw it away. The man couldn't help but notice how the lady was worried about him, but she asked for help. But she didn't want him to sacrifice himself. The brunette asked her not to worry, because he wasn't going to leave the saint alone. He tried to hug the lady, but suddenly an animal entered through the window, ordering him to take his hands away. He was indignant that the man stopped turning his tail and just left. And Belina, in turn, noticed that the demon seemed tired. Islan hugged the blonde, to which she asked Radbun to leave for a while because she would come soon. She explained this, saying that she needed to talk to the monster about what happened. To this, the brown-haired man bowed and said he would be at the door. The demon was surprised that this dog listened to the saint, although he had good taming skills. But the saint asked him to stop treating people like dogs. The lady asked him what he had done, because there was a lot of magical power. Now that she thought about it, the man had actually helped because the meeting had been cancelled. He knelt down and pressed his nose against the girl, although it was he who now looked like a dog. The demon said he had just cast a net, because he needed to find out where the lady's sacred power was going. It seems that if this monster can find the place where the power went, then he can find Iris. Or rather, the true main character of this novel. She already wanted to get up from the chair, but the man asked to pet him more because it felt pleasant and warm. Or this time, he should please the blonde. But since the male and female were in the main hall, the saint threatened that if he continued, she would call Radbin. But the beast was ready to take another look at this dog. Lena suggested that Aslan only liked her body. He did not deny that the girl's body was beautiful because she was his woman, but she never gave permission to do anything else. The blue-eyed girl suggested that monsters, like demons, want to take the soul. It seems this soul was located somewhere in the chest. Besides the heart, the man honestly admitted that he wanted to win the heart of her ladyship. Normally, a monster would never do anything for a human. That's why Aslan asked her to smile at him. He explained that he would like to see the saint smile, but he didn't know how, and it seemed she wasn't happy about the ring. The girl wondered where this object came from, which she hadn't seen before, but it turned out that Aslan gave it to her, saying that he would let the lady go for today, so it was worth smiling at him once. Like others, people, but the man was dissatisfied with the fake smile, saying that she could go, and that if anything arose, he would immediately come to tell her. Priest Carl Leon has come to believe that he is the most dangerous person for Lena. When he saw him, he realized that this man would become the high priest. But don't they say that excessive modesty is hypocrisy? In any case, the blue-eyed man wanted to tell Carl something, because he is extremely interested in the saint. This meant that she was beautiful. Moreover, she was more innocent than the rumors about her, since a man simply couldn't help but fall in love. However, a guard is presented to him, Commander Radbond, which irritates him greatly. And if Charles becomes high priest, he will be able to take him to the outskirts of the city. But this was an inappropriate question, and of course, he would not become high priest. But no priest could fulfill such a request. But everything went according to plan, because first the man had to refuse. Instantly, the priest asked if he sincerely admired the saint. The crown prince who is in love and is not calm because of the saint. This was enough to take advantage of it. A knight and a mage, these two have powers that will definitely help the saint. However, matters in the world are decided not only by strength. The man does not know about the battle in the field, but here, the Great Temple, is a place where one does not fight with strength, but with the head. And Leon C., the person who will finally win Lena's heart. Mana will spread across the entire continent, weaken, and soon reach a level where an ordinary priest and current one will not be able to feel it. Radbund said that this is why they are now looking for the monster, but the knights will not be able to do it. These three really joined forces and helped Ivlina. It would be nice if the three of them could live and continue to get along. The lady was informed that Priest Carl had requested an informal meeting, and that the blue-eyed lady had free time from work in the afternoon. The man said that, until the essence of the mana covering the entire continent is revealed, and the temple, no one will be able to meet the saint one-on-one. Due to the current situation, they will meet under the personal supervision of Commander Ratbin, as the girl said, and the meeting place will be the official reception of the temple. In a place where there are always many people, he will not be able to openly harm the saint. Surprisingly, Priest Carl was late. Instead, Crown Prince Leon appeared, but the blonde said she had an appointment with Priest Carl. But he also came because Priest Carl requested a meeting. Suddenly, again a sharp pain stabbed like a needle in Ivlina's chest. When the prince rushed to her and asked what hurt, the lady sharply asked him to hug her, because she again had a strong desire to quench her thirst. Realizing what the blonde had just done, she pushed the man away from her. He fell to the floor and shouted for no one to approach her. The body began to feel hot, and the girl understood that if someone climbed up now, there would be trouble, but she needed to endure this pain. The prince grabbed the brunette by the cloak. Had this really happened before with the knight? The blonde was angry that Radbun knew everything and let it be, and he calls himself the commander of the knights. Leon was already raising his fist to hit his opponent, but Lena stopped him. The lady counted and showed that Amark was doing strange things to her. The crown prince asked if there was any way to mitigate this. Tears rolled down the saint's cheeks, and she admitted that Aslan had hugged her before. There was only one way, so the blonde touched the man and asked him to hug her. Someone has already started checking if there are people in the room. Although obvious signs that someone was, there have been detected lately. Really, in a place where there are always many people, he will not be able to openly harm her. The blonde knew that it was all a setup, as the priests had already burst into the room. Carl really lured the lady into a trap and subjected her to a bad snare. Desperate, clutching her dagger, the girl waved her hand to stab herself, but the prince stopped her. She was sure that if she cut the mark or cut off her leg, she would get rid of this pain. The man immediately hugged the lady, telling her that he also desired her. But not in that way. Blue Eyes lifted the saint in his arms, but Radbun ordered him to stop and asked what he was going to do with her. That day she also cried, although she was not as crazy as now. Those tears could not be ignored. The prince only hugged his beloved and asked Radbun to close his eyes and cover his ears, and to turn around as well. Blue Eyes asked not to give a reason to repeat it twice, because the knight would not be able to do it anyway. The dog doesn't even dare. The commander of the knights who defends her has no right. The brunette turned away, listening to the saint's pleas to finally hug her. The man knew that the saint was not herself. At least he would make sure this would not become a terrible memory. At this moment, if the blonde really wanted it, it would be great. When Leon finished satisfying Evelina, she apologized and fainted. For the first time, she felt so pathetic and empty inside. Suddenly, Priest Carl himself knocked on the room and asked if she was inside. There was no answer, but the man did not feel very well, which is why he was late. But if he were in his place, he would definitely have waited. He really believed in the saint, but one of the priests said that he had recently heard sounds from inside, but he thought maybe the saint had some personal matters. He meant that she was inside, so Carl suggested going in and taking a look. The monster began to wonder with whom the saint quenched her thirst, with the crown prince, or with the commander of the knights. But in any case, if others see the girl from this perspective, they will definitely turn their backs on her. So, Evelina had no choice but to hug him again, so the man asked to be excused. But since they told him she was inside, he decided to enter without knocking. Suddenly, Leon's voice was heard, who was indignant that the priest was late, although he himself would arrange a meeting. The priest did not understand what had happened and why he was alone. This is illogical, because there is nowhere to hide in that room. The blonde started asking why he was looking around like a rat, but Carl kept trying to figure out where the saint had gone. The next morning, the blonde woke up in a hot bath. She immediately realized she was in Ratbun's house. The girl was scared because she had recently been in the waiting room. And what the hell happened? The commander brought clean clothes and towels, when suddenly he had to come in because the saint almost lost consciousness. The brown-haired man apologized for his tactlessness. The blue-eyed girl did not remember what happened, whether the man had really carried her out of the waiting room. Although this was impossible, the green-eyed one said that everything was already resolved, and there was nothing to worry about. This is the worst thing that could happen. The girl didn't even dare to explain the situation. Tears sprang from her eyes when she realized that neither Rathbun nor Leon would ever want to be near her again. All the other priests must have also clearly seen the scorned saint indulging in debauchery regardless of time and place, and Belina feared that the end of the story could not be changed. The lady wondered if it made sense to go on, because now she strongly wanted to die. Suddenly, Lena realized exactly what Evelina had felt her whole life. Since she has the body of a saint, she could not die as she wished, and the girl neither. Turning around, the blonde ordered to let her go. The lady said that the commander should not force himself to do this, having shouted that his duty as commander of the knights Radbun is to protect. So, there is no need to try to fulfill your duty for a saint like her. The man suddenly said that these actions were not just his responsibility, but the girl was completely sure that the knight hated her, because even touching her was unpleasant for him. He hated her so much that he rejected her to the end. Suddenly, to calm the youngest, the man knelt down and apologized. He tried to explain the reason why he rejected the saint. The thing is, she didn't sincerely wish for it at that moment, because the dark-haired man wanted the girl to wish for it from her heart, and not from her body, because his feelings are not his duty as a knight. He confidently said that he had this attitude towards her for quite some time. The man admitted that he has feelings for the blonde that should not exist. He wanted to touch her and kiss her. He wanted to possess her. But when the crown prince hugged the saint, the brunette felt jealous of him. Lena was suffering, and Radbun did not have these thoughts at that moment. The blonde kissed the man on the forehead, and told him that these were his true feelings. The couple kissed on the lips, and the knight said that he was in love with the saint. And moreover, he loves her more than anyone in the world. The blonde was told how they managed to get out safely thanks to Aslan. When they literally reached a dead end, the girl said that there was a secret passage in the wall. But it turned out that Radbond knew about it from the beginning. When the man carried her asleep to the room, he also knew about the passage. The brown-haired man awkwardly looked away and made a request. Lena thought it was quite difficult, but Radbond asked to call Evelina by her name. But the lady smiled and asked to call her simply Lena. The saint wanted to hug him, but she felt Aslan's magic and simply thanked the knight for seeing her off. She asked the brown-haired man to leave, and he told her that it didn't matter who she was. He had no right to argue, but if the girl somehow got hurt, Radbund asked for permission to protect her. He was absolutely worried about her due to the sudden appearance of the sign. Lena likes Radbund, but that doesn't mean she hates Leon or Aslan. Fortunately, the demon delayed and allowed the knight to leave. The beast may hate, but he dismissed Radbond very easily because the girl cared about this guy. Even though he bothered him, the blonde said she was very lucky with Aslan because she heard that he helped resolve the situation in the reception room. But this was the first time the redhead had heard such words. She had a strange premonition and went there. The girl was unconscious, and people with holy power were milling outside the door. They were about to enter, and Aslan thought, "The saint will not like this, that's all." Although it was Carl's trap, thanks to the guy, she got out of it. The blonde asked him what he was doing there, and why his clothes were so revealing. But Priest Carl himself called him, telling him that he had something to tell. And they also invited the saint. So why does he ask what the prince is doing here? And he also brought so many priests to this place. The priests stated that this was originally a place where priests frequently visited. He also asked what happened to the crown prince's clothes and what he was doing here. Blue Eyes said that he thought of the saint while waiting for Carl and needed to deal with his emotion. The man guessed that he was deliberately making him angry. But as he said before, his feelings for the saint are sincere. The blonde hoped that Carl would no longer try to annoy him. The heir ordered him to greet her with a smile next time. After learning what happened, the girl said that Aslan would continue to help her, even in things that were not included in their agreement. So she wanted to know what she could do for him. But the demon only asked her to ask him for help if something happened. And all he needs is the saint's gratitude. The blonde smiled and asked the beast to take care of her. The man also noticed that everyone decided to call the lady Lena. It seems Lena didn't really like being called lady. The day had been exhausting, so the redhead would be there to protect the girl. Although they got out safely from Carl's trap, there was no way he would stop just like that. The good news is that not even Carl himself can control this. If possible, the girl would be worried about it now. Evelina was informed that Crown Prince Leon had personally delivered the letter to her. He said he would not ask for an audience and left immediately. But the saint suddenly left the room and asked Leon not to leave. The blonde said he was going to Erie because he was worried that the lady was tired, and he wondered if she rested well yesterday. The blonde suddenly asked if the man had time now. Finally, the saint gathered the 3 boys in a room. She asked to be allowed to explain why she had gathered everyone here. But Aslan, to some extent, knew about it. The girl said that she had lost most of her memories. Radbund understood why she sometimes seemed like a completely different person. It was still early, and yet the girl did not have the courage to tell them that she was fake. The blonde said that she didn't even remember how these marks appeared on her thigh. However, given the circumstances, she thought that Priest Carl was involved. The saint asked for help because she wants to get rid of Carl. Leon was willing to kill him, but if Aslan had been right, he wouldn't have let the priest live either. Aslan said that these marks represent a complex hexagon, the origin of which is unknown. And if Priest Carl dies, there is a possibility that the problem will never be solved. At this point, the saint has discovered that these traces are consuming her sexual desire. The temple has its own system. Firstly, the girl was going to deprive him of the right to be high priest. Fortunately, the case to stop Captain Rathbun was dropped. Everyone expected such a conclusion. He may have made some mistakes, but leaving is too much. Priest Carl said that everyone knew his devotion and responsibility well. By the way, the girl is very happy that the meeting to elect the high priest has resumed. Now Carl can take the position of high priest, but is he worthy of it? Not much time left. The saint had already pushed the priest out of her sight in the past. But wherever he is, the man will always pray for the saint's well-being. The man greeted Alec, as they had not seen each other for a long time. The boy looked healthy, so he asked how everything had been all this time. Despite being far away, he remembered the moments he spent with the saint. The priest shook Carl's hand, to which everyone called him a rude man. That boy was his former student. Since he is a novice, he still doesn't know much. Carl was sure that soon everything would be in his hands. But a problem has arisen, because the temple knights are searching the priest's residence. Rathbun asked for cooperation in the investigation and continued with the case. It seems a suspicious object was found in Carl's room. The man himself was against Rathbun examining this thing. He really knew what it was, but the man didn't dare to suspect him like that. Why a search without prior notice? If they had warned him, he would have hidden it in advance. Finally, the saint herself appeared at the crime scene. The girl regretted that the search was conducted secretly for him. However, it was forced action. The lady asked Captain Radbond to hand over the item. It was more serious than expected, so Radbond crushed the object with his sword. A black crow flew out of the box and started screaming. The priest really brought the magic beast to the holy temple. This was understandable, because the beast followed him, and the girl asked the knights to kill him. As the man could not cope, the saint used her divine power. Everyone was surprised because the girl destroyed the red magic and saved everyone. There was a tree on the ground that blocked this power. By making a box out of this wood, Carl hid the presence of the magic beast. The blonde said she received an anonymous letter. It said that he had tamed demonic beasts on the outskirts of the empire and brought them to the main temple. Naturally, the blue-eyed girl didn't believe it at first either. However, judging by the content of the letter, the lady could not believe it to be true. Carl shouted that it was a false accusation and that someone planned it to harm her. The lady said that she would also like to believe it was a false accusation because he was not a man capable of such a thing. The blue-eyed girl promised to do everything possible to prove his innocence. The saint went up to hug Aslan because he succeeded. To develop such a situation in front of everyone, if it became known that he was connected with the demonic beast, his life would end. His lordship thanked the wizard for his help. Very soon, Priest Carl will be finished. In fact, she is now being hugged by the king of the demonic beasts. But sooner or later, she will cease to be a saint. The blonde began to praise other people's magic, asking him to teach it to her. If she studies it, it will be useful to her when she leaves the main temple. The man explained that the holy power the lady possessed would reject magical power. Surely she doesn't know it as well as he does, even though he is intimate with her. But most demonic beasts would turn to ashes if they touched the girl. Holy and magical powers are opposites, so magic is something she can use. But it is worth remembering that there are demonic beasts capable of resisting holy power. And him, her son, who will be born in him. In any case, her holy power will disappear when Iris appears. Then the girl will have no problem learning magic. The man asked to tell him if she needed magic, but the blonde would do everything on her own. Although she was interested in magic, possessing holy power, the demon asked what the blue-eyed girl was hiding from him. Magic will help the lady later, when she loses her power and leaves the temple. The girl said she would like to try to do something impossible with the help of holy power. For example, fly freely and move around. Upon learning that the saint would like to fly in the sky, the man took her in his arms and jumped out the window. The blonde suddenly started crying and saying she was jealous because she could see so much beauty every day. The demon claimed that Lena can also do this freely whenever she wants. He said he would grant all her wishes, so her abilities are his abilities. In a letter, they asked Leon if he was doing well at the Great Temple, because the Empress missed him. The man did not understand what kind of nonsense his father was writing, because his mother certainly did not miss him. He remembers that as a child, he asked her about his mother's hatred, but she could not hate the crown prince, because thanks to his birth, the emperor is obsessed with her. The father will obviously curse his son for staying idle at the temple. Going up to the roof, the prince met the commander of the knights, Rathbun, and noticed that he was admiring the sky. He watched very closely how Aslan flew with the saint. The man could have simply taken her away, but he didn't. Even Aslan, the magic king, is trying to win Lena's heart, and then the prince will have to try harder. Instantly, taking advantage of the man's inattention, Leon punched him in the nose. All this was at Lena's request.